Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Township of Georgian Bay for the morning of Tuesday, November 5th, 2024, and for our Planning Council meeting. And I'd like to call this meeting to order at 9:01. And in the spirit of reconciliation, we wish to acknowledge the enduring relationship between Indigenous peoples and the territories that they have traditionally occupied. We recognize and deeply appreciate the historic connection they have to this place. The land, the water, the sky, and all that live on, in, under, above it. You get the idea. We are grateful for the opportunity to meet here, and we thank all the generations of Indigenous peoples who have taken care of this land and who continue to care for it. And we want to show our respect. Hundreds of years after the first treaties were signed, they remain relevant today. May they guide our decisions and our actions. We commit to learn, to educate, to honor sacred places, and to take action towards real truth and reconciliation. And I'd also like this morning to recognize the passing of Murray Sinclair yesterday, the chair of the Truth and Reconciliation Board, a judge, a senator, and a leader on these lands for decades. Which Council, any declarations of pecuniary interest or conflict of interest? Okay, if anything surfaces that may fall under that, that would be good to let us know at the time. Madam Clerk, I understand we may have one or two people who want to participate in open forum. Can I get you to take the lead on arranging that, please?
I believe we have a couple of individuals who have signed in for open forum, Mr. Carter, Mr. Santoro, and Mr. Stuart. No, okay, just Mr. Carter and Mr. Santoro then. If one of you would like to come up to the desk and turn the microphone on. In 2 minutes.
Yeah, and just as a advisement, you have 2 minutes and to speak to the topic, a topic on the agenda today, as opposed to the weather.
There, all right. Need some training. Mayor Couture, I know you like people to be brief, and I will do my best.
Not only
to
that,
do
we require it in this particular case.
Okay, I will be. I'll start now. Okay, Mayor Couture and members of council, I'm going to assume you read my letter and are aware of my 4 concerns pertaining to the sale of the road allowance behind Lot 12 in the Lakeview subdivision. I do not object to the sale. I feel any one of these concerns has the potential to be troublesome, though, enough to recommend deferring approval of the application. This morning, I'm only going to focus on one of those concerns, the proposed drainage initiative council has directed staff to address through the Drainage Act. I am a professional civil engineer trained in surface water management. I am not saying this to boast or intimidate. I say it to gain your trust. Saying this identifies I follow a code of practice that requires me to be honest and true to my engineering knowledge. I am also not allowed to advocate on behalf of anyone, including myself. To answer Councilor Bocek's question from last month, is there a potential negative consequence of approving this application and council's directive to address the surface water management concerns within the subdivision? My answer is a resounding yes. Surface water management is complicated. The first thing a surface water manager, design engineer focuses on is the topography. It provides information about where water flows naturally today and where it has the potential to be redirected economically tomorrow. Every reasonable effort is made to keep the flow natural, as this protects the environment and saves money by reducing the need for drainage easements, structures, and expensive maintenance. Today, environmental protection legislation is also a major priority. Together, they guide the design process that locates property lines and road allowances. In this case, it will also help define how best to divide the road allowance among the interested parties. The desire for straight lines on a paper or the equal sharing of the road allowance will likely not be the design engineer's deciding criteria. The provincial legislation used to allow part of the road allowance to be sold and attached to a lot requires the lot to be removed from the subdivision. However, this legislation is based on an assumption, and that assumption is that another part of the provincial legislation, namely the requirement for proper lot drainage, to be implemented. Question: is this legislation still valid, recognizing the Ontario Planning Act was not followed in 1971 and is not today? Fortunately, this is not in my wheelhouse. You need a lawyer to ask this. I'm trying to stick to my code of conduct here. What I can say, removing the lot from the subdivision prior to implementing the Drainage Act, or the drainage plan, will make the drainage solution more complex and likely more expensive than it needs to be. As an engineer qualified in surface water management, I am respectfully recommending Council defer this application to ensure the surface water design is done first, so everyone, the township, and your constituents can save both money and grief. As a concerned constituent, I respectfully request Council consider the implementation of a site control plan agreement to ensure the character and the environment of this area is not negatively impacted by the eventual approval of the sale. I will remain here when the application is being considered. Please consider this an opportunity to have me answer any of your questions that may arise regarding surface water management. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Council, I'm going to forego giving you an opportunity to ask questions at this point simply because the topic will come up later and Mr. Santoro has offered to remain in the room. So we have Mr. Carter. And of course, same rules. We have to be fair.
All I really have to say is at the meeting, I was here last time, we were asked to Dennis Carter, owner of Lot 11. Okay, when I was here last month, we were asked to reach out to our neighbors and see what they had to say, as basically your policy states that your neighbors should try to talk to you when they're trying to get the road allowance. We have reached out. We sent 3 text messages and 1 email to the Stuarts, 4 text messages to the owner of Lot 10, and we have heard nothing but 1 reply from the Stuarts asking what the owner of Lot 10 wanted to do. And that was all. We feel that if they don't agree with us purchasing it, we don't see why we should have to agree and they should be able to purchase either. As we are both allowed, therefore it should go with the same either way. And that's all I have to say.
All right, thank you very much. And that's it for open forum. And we'll now go into the road allowance application portion of our meeting, very conveniently because it's relevant to what we just heard. And I believe initially I will turn that over to our clerk to give us her update since last month.
So application R24-04 was received by the Stuarts to purchase part of the road allowance that abuts their lot to increase the lot to permit for future development. Per the Township Shore Road Allowance and Road Allowance Policy for 2022, the Stuarts are requesting to purchase 50% of the width of the road allowance that aligns with the property, allowing for the natural extension of the lot line. This application was first heard at a public meeting per the Municipal Act on October 8th, 2024. First, I'll be providing an overview of the application. Following that, I'll be providing a brief history of the road allowance and a status update on the application since the October meeting. The purchase area totals 1,289 square meters at a cost of $8 per square meter for a purchase price of $10,312 plus HST. The property is zoned Shoreline Residential Type 6. This is an undeveloped lot and there is no open building permits on file. The subject lands are located on 6 Mile Lake. Here you can see the lot with the abutting road allowance to the west and south of the lot. Here is an aerial image of the subject lands. Here the imagery shows the area of the whole road allowance, also known as Lakeview Crescent. Here you can see the general area of the subject lands on 6 Mile Lake, and note that it is south of Crooked Bay Road to the east of Highway 400. Here's a copy of the reference plan. And here is a close-up of the reference plan where you can see part 1 that will merge on title with lot 12. In light blue, you can see part 1 highlighted to merge on title with lot 12, surrounded by the remaining division of the road allowance per the current policy, as it would be divided through lots 8 through 14, excluding lot 11. As noted in my report, in 1970, Lakeview Crescent was established as a registered plan of subdivision, which led to the dedication of this road to the township. Subsequent to this, the Huskets Drive was settled to the north, rendering Lakeview Crescent redundant. The original parcel was owned by Mr. Clarke, who established the subdivision, where some of the lots were transferred to family and others sold off. Some of the lots still remain within the family lineage today. The Stuarts purchased their cottage on lot 13 in 2003, and then subsequently the Stuarts purchased lot 12 in 2019 from the owners of lot 11. The majority of the 14 lots have been developed with the exception of lots 6, 9, and 12. At the October 8th meeting, 2 letters of correspondence have been received at that time. 1 letter of no objection was received from Judy Kirk requesting fair and equitable division to everyone who abuts the road allowance, including herself as owner of lot 11. And 1 letter in support from Scott Rogers. He notes his intention to purchase 50% of the road allowance abutting his property of lot 8, which has a portion of the road allowance that aligns with lot 12 of the Stuarts. Since the October meeting, staff have corresponded with the owners of lots 5 through 8 or through 14, excluding lot 7 on this matter. Additionally, staff have consulted for a second time with the operations and planning staff and legal counsel on this application. In the following slides, I will provide an overview of the position and comments received. The owners of lot 5 and 6 object to the application of the merit that no portion of the road allowance should be sold by the township until the Haskets Drive drainage is resolved. Written correspondence was circulated from this owner. Lot 7 purchased the entire width of the road allowance in 2015 and have not provided comments on this application. The owner of lot 8 is supportive of the application. They provided written comments that were circulated in advance of the October public meeting and spoke in person in the future. They too have expressed interest in purchasing the road allowance abutting their property per the policy. They would like to wait to make an application until such time as the drainage from Haskets Drive has been resolved, and they receive circulation of this public notice. The owner of lots 9 and 10 are in support of the application. In the future, they wish to purchase the remaining half of the road allowance that abuts both of these properties. They also receive circulation of the public notice. The owner of lot 11 provided written comments that were circulated in advance of the October public meeting. The spouse of the owner spoke in person at that public meeting, and Mr. Carter also provided comments today during this morning's open forum. They object to the application as they would also like to purchase up to 33 feet of the road allowance that abuts their property line, and they receive circulation of the public notice. Lot 12 is the applicant of this road allowance, or is the applicant to purchase the road allowance. The applicants, Rob and Tracey Stuart are present today, along with their agent Victoria Lemieux from Morgan Planning, who also presented at the public meeting in October. Both the Stuarts and Ms. Lemieux are able to respond to any questions that council may have today. Lot 13 is also the same owner as Lot 12, the applicant. Lot 14 is the owner, or Lot 14 objects to the application of the Shore Road Allowance and Road Allowance Policy, does not follow the conditions of the Planning Act, and therefore is opposed to the application and principles of the policy, in addition to the Haskets Drive drainage. Mr. Santoro spoke during this morning's open forum, and his correspondence was circulated to council. The owners of lots 8, 9, and 10 are in support of the application. These lots received circulation of the original public notice as they were directly impacted and/or have a right to apply for 50% of the road allowance per the policy. These owners have expressed interest in purchasing the remaining 50% of the road allowance. So the intention of the policy is to create a natural extension of the lot lines by way of merging the Shore Road Allowance and Road Allowance with the original parcel. If Lot 11 were to purchase a portion of the road allowance, their entitlement would be a depth of 33 feet from their lot line. Since lots 10 and 12 would also have an equal right to that portion, the 3 lots would split the portion, each getting 1/3, which is 22 feet in width. Staff are aware of the drainage concerns in this area and have consulted with the Director of Operations. And if there was thought to have impact on Lot 12, this application would not have been brought forward. However, the sale of this portion of the road allowance does not hinder the solutions for the drainage. The township's obligations under the Planning Act are being met. If the application is approved, a deeming bylaw is enacted along with the closing bylaw. Staff have consulted with the Director of Planning and the Manager of Planning on this application. This policy underwent a thorough review in 2022, including consultation with legal counsel, comparison of the municipalities' policies, neighboring municipalities' policies, and consideration for fair and equitable division of land. The township's unique landscape will make it impossible to capture every circumstance within a singular policy. However, the intention and direction of the policy can be captured. There are also steps in the sale of land that are required and addressed through the legal process and therefore not included within the policy, such as the notification of hydro and utilities. These notifications are conducted by our legal counsel. Staff have followed all notice provisions per the policy, and the Stuart's application is in keeping with the intention of the policy. The only objection to the application that is about the specific application is that of Lot 11, who also wish to purchase a portion of the road allowance. If Lot 11 is permitted to do so, it has a negative impact on Lots 10 and 12. It is because of these reasons staff are recommending the Stuart's application to purchase a portion of the road allowance abutting Lot 12 be approved as presented. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I will now turn it over to council if they have any questions or comments with regards to this application. All right. So I'm going to start with Councillor Graziano, please.
Thank you, and through your worship, Ms. Way, can you reiterate the 3 that have objected? I can't, was it 11, 12, and 14? I believe that there was 3 lots that have objected openly. Is that correct?
Lots 5 and 6 have objected on the fact that they believe the Haskets Drive drainage should be resolved first. Lot 11 has objected because they wish to purchase a portion of the road allowance, and Lot 14 has objected as they believe the drainage needs to be resolved and they feel the Planning Act hasn't been followed. The only ones abutting the actual road allowance are that of Lot 11.
I can appreciate that, and thank you for the additional context. If memory serves me correct, for additional context as well with regards to Lot 8, which is Mr. Rogers, if memory serves me correctly, he approved, suffice it that all the other neighbors would agree to severing the lands and each getting their fair share. Is Mr. Rogers present in council? I do believe that that was the case. And And I want to confirm that if we are offering context for 5, 6, and 14, I think it's equally important that we offer context for number 8 and the comments that were made in the last council meeting. So at this present time, I wonder whether he still holds that position with regards to he consents only if the event that the division happens equally and fairly and equitably amongst all lots, including the abutting lot. And I believe it's, forgive me, I don't recall what number the Clerks are at. But is that to your understanding, and is Mr. Rogers present to confirm that?
Mr. Rogers is not present at this time. I had subsequent correspondence with him since the October meeting. He is satisfied with the application, providing that he gets his 50%, which he would be entitled to.
Okay, so he's concerned that he's not. I appreciate that. With regards to the correspondences, in our last council meeting, I was under the impression that the parties would have to go back and consult with each other. Do we know whether or not there was correspondence between Ms. Clarke and the applicant currently? And if so, how did those correspondences, how did that correspondence conclude? How did that negotiation conclude?
It is my Okay, hold on. It's my understanding that Ms. Clarke and/or her husband, Mr. Carter, did reach out. What transpired in those conversations, I cannot speak to, but I do believe Ms. Lemieux, if the mayor would like her to speak, could respond on behalf of her clients.
I don't need to know specifics. Did they come to an agreement on allowing the Clerks to be able to acquire their portion? Or was that not, did that not happen?
The owner of lot 10 and the owner of lot 12, which is the applicant who would be impacted by lot 11 purchasing, do not agree to permit lot 11 to purchase a portion of the road allowance, but lot 10 and lot 12 are in agreement.
Okay, so it sounds to me like right now, no one's in agreement of anything. There's portions here, there's portions there, some agree, some don't. The conversation that was supposed to happen after our last council meeting likely didn't happen, and perhaps there was not a lengthy dialogue. Rather, it sounds like this is a ball of wax that we probably don't want to get ourselves involved in. And I understand in previous applications, this was declined. So I'm wondering whether it'd be prudent for us to not allow this friction amongst neighbors, rather keep it status quo. Those are my comments for now. I reserve additional comments as we at our next round. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis?
Yeah, I'll put a clarification to our clerk if you don't mind. I think part of the issue here is the wording of the bylaw. Got that right? In that lands adjacent to are able to purchase, but lands that abut are not. Is that correct? Have I got that right? Abutting is the issue versus adjacent?
Yes, not quite in that language, but yes. So because lot 11 technically touches the end of the road allowance, but the intention of the policy is to allow those who run the full abutting or adjacent to the road allowance would be the ones that would be entitled to the 33
Right.
feet of the 50%.
Right.
The way it's worded references that they get half the width. Well, if you're abutting at the end, there isn't a width to get because you're at the end of it versus the side of it.
So I'm looking at lot 11 and I'm comparing it to say lot 13. The road allowance that would be available to lot 13 would be road allowance that's abutting lot 13. Is that correct? So theoretically, lot 13 would not be able to have that, be able to purchase that because it's abutting? It's abutting in the same way 11 is, or is it the way it abuts that's the issue?
It's the way it abuts
Yeah,
because
okay.
it's still technically the side of the road allowance.
Right, okay, I think I better understand it in that context. One other question, in your presentation, you indicated that if lot 11 were allowed some portion of that road allowance, you came up with a section that was not the full width of the road allowance, but was like so many feet in on either side, right? And I'm wondering if that option is worth considering, setting that land aside for 11 to purchase if they want. If there's any flavor for that within council. I mean, otherwise, I have no problem with this as you have presented it. My only issue is, again, lot 11 feeling left out on that. And if we gave them a portion that they could purchase if they wanted, and just set it aside, would that not be a problem?
I would second that.
So following further consultation with legal counsel, their advice was that because the 33 feet width would be divided 3 ways, so lot 11 would only get 22 feet in the middle from either side, which is, 33 feet by 22 feet. It's not a very wide portion, and that would be in the middle. I'm not sure that would be beneficial to
If I
any
would
party.
satisfy anybody, but I'm just wondering if it's something we could deal with. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bochek, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, my question would be for our Director of Operations, Mr. Sokach. Can you just clarify to me that under the Drainage Act, there would be no difference whether the township owned the property or the stewards owned the property? Would it still need to comply? And if there was an order of compliance given, it would either be the responsibility of the township or the owners of the property?
Through the mayor, to the best of my understanding, what you've said is correct, but that is the best of my understanding. This is a very complex and confusing act, and I'm not nearly smart enough to fully understand.
Okay, my concerns are there's been quite a few allocations made. I've probably spent more time on this file than anything in 10 years, reaching out to staff, reaching out to the stewards, and certainly would have welcomed the conversation from anyone else, but I didn't receive anything outside of Mr. Santoro, which I read his unsolicited advice, and I took it as that, and I don't think there's any difference in drainage whether we own the property or the stewards own the property. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I want to make a few observations, and one is, I think, if I played around and did things a little bit differently, going, I'll call it beyond the policy, and say that, what under normal circumstances, the road allowance is shared between the properties on either side of it. And that's why if it's a 66-foot allowance, one side can get 33, the other side can get 33, and that's the way it is unless both sides agree to something different. If we got complicated, I find it interesting because the lawyer suggested that one little block might be available, 33 feet by 22 feet, which would be 726 square feet. We're not talking anything huge. I always thought about doing, I'll call it triangular lines. I'm not sure they would actually meet, given the fact that this isn't a perfectly right angle. It's slightly, so it would be a very awkward, it would be a misshapen triangle that would be somewhere in the range of 1,000 square feet. And I'm thinking to myself, that's a complication that isn't worth the effort. Because for 1,000 square feet, you're going to have to get a surveyor out, plot these points of who's going to pay for it, and what have you gained? The other thing I point out is that last month, we chose to defer, and our reason for deferring was because we were going to give the neighbors another month to see whether the 3 neighbors could agree to how the lines should be divided. The 3 neighbors have not gotten together and come back with a proposal for council to consider. There is not an agreement has not been achieved. If I understand it correctly, the neighbors on either side, 10 and 12, agree with our policy and have the split. It's perfectly understandable because it follows policy and it makes sense for their particular positions, locations. They have not agreed to give a portion of that road allowance to the owner of lot 11, nor on let me call it a design in which to do it. So to me, the condition that the condition we put on the deferral of the three neighbors coming up with an agreement has not been satisfied. So from my perspective, we're back at where we were a month ago. We have a report from our clerk suggesting that a portion of the road allowance be sold, and that it follows the policy, and it follows the logic of the policy. And I think that's the decision we have to make, is do we agree to follow the policy? I'm quite concerned about further deferring this, because if we're deferring this in regards to the Drainage Act, that has been going on for, Councillor Vocek, you probably will remember better than I, but long before this term took place. I mean, I don't know if it's been a 10-year discussion or a half dozen years, or I don't know what, a long time. It hasn't been resolved yet. And if we as council want to wait for that to be resolved, it may be a very long wait. And I believe my interpretation from what I've read is that the Drainage Act applies to the lands around the problem area, regardless of ownership. And that part of the Drainage Act does is give you I'm not sure it's a formula, but an approach to saying, okay, if works are required and the works cost X, here's the share that each property owner should be paying into it based on various factors. And if the solution to the Drainage Act requires some contribution and or modification of the road allowance that the Stuarts wish to purchase, then they'd be taking on that obligation. That's a risk they take, in my opinion, if they purchase this piece of road allowance. And I just have to assume they're willing to take on that risk because their application going forward. So my comments. I don't know if anybody wants any additional. I see Councillor Graziano's hand. Councillor Graziano.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I want to build on beyond the policy, as you had stated earlier. This is a very complex situation, given that half of the neighbors disagree, a portion of the neighbors agree under certain circumstances. Some have abstained and have not provided counsel with their comments. We have a drainage situation that's ongoing that continues to also cloud or be brought into consideration with regards to this. The issue that I strongly have here is that we have two policies specific to the sale of road allowances, and that is that the lands that do abut are allowed to purchase, and Lot 11 does abut. We've determined that. And that there must be consent by all the neighbors, and there's not. And so the issue that I have here is that by passing this here today, we would be going and working against our bylaw, opening up some friction and continuing to perpetuate friction amongst the neighbors. And of course, 10 and 12 are at the advantage here, and naturally that's why they are going to agree with each other, because they stand to gain the most if in the event that this passes, because they'll see their lots increase significantly. Whereas 11, who does abut, who does conform to our bylaw, would lose that portion that they would otherwise be entitled to. So my thoughts here on the best way forward, from at least the way that I see it logically, is that per Councillor Jarvis's comments, we offer the Lot 11 their portion and remove that portion from lots 10 and 12, whatever that may be. Or alternatively, we decline altogether and leave it like it was decided in the last term of council or the previous term thereof. It was, as we've come to understand, it came before council, it was declined for, I believe, the contentiousness around the whole circumstance. And here we are once again albeit with a different applicant, or I believe the same applicant, but different reasons. So, so with that said, those are my comments on which direction I think we should go. We either make it fair consistently across the board and allow Lot 11 their portion at the same time, or alternatively, we decline and maintain status quo. Thank you.
One correction, if I may, and that is the policy that we have with regards to selling road allowance does not require the consent of the neighbors unless that purchase is of the more than what the applicant would normally require. In other words, an applicant can buy the full width of the road allowance if the neighbor on the other side consents. That's when consent's required. But the consent is not required if the applicant is simply buying, if I can call it, their share. And further, our policy does address this type of situation in that it refers to that the applicant has applied for the road allowance portion that the policy, as it currently is written, would allow. Any other comments from any other councillors?
I'd like a registered vote, Your Worship.
Sorry?
I'm requesting a registered vote.
Okay, I will read the motion and then I will turn it over to our clerk. I have moved by Councillor, I can't have it moved by Councillor Craig. He's not here. Oh, there you are, Councillor Predko. I apologize.
I've just been quiet so far.
Yes, I have moved by Councillor Quiet Predko and seconded by Councillor Stephen Jarvis. Be it resolved that Council pass the closing bylaw 2024-097 to stop up, close, and convey part of Lakeview Crescent, Plan M468, being Part 1, Plan 35R-27538, formerly Baxter, now in the Township of Georgian Bay, in the District Municipality of Muskoka, roll number 4465-030-0360-1200.0000, for the purchase price of $10,312 plus HST, and that Council passed a deeming bylaw 2024-098, part of Plan M468, formerly in the Township of Baxter, now in the Township of Georgian Bay, the District Municipality of Muskoka, not to be a registered plan of subdivision for the purpose of the Planning Act, RSO 1990 CP 13 S50 bracket 3. Oh, is the slide?
There's no municipal address, so it's the closing bylaw and the deeming bylaw that we pass for every, well, we don't pass it.
That one slide.
Oh, okay, I see what you're asking. Yeah. Sorry. Best one.
Wait and dark blue it.
So the dark blue outline is lot 12. And this light blue is the 50% of the road allowance that would merge on title with lot 12.
So the dark blue.
The dark blue that is above, I can't even see the lot.
Like here?
Yes, that's not part of this.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's just the two pieces, the light blue on a diagonal and the dark blue on the diagonal.
Yeah. Just the light blue.
Just
The dark blue that is fully shaded in
Yes.
is how the division of the road allowance would be split up per the policy for the other abutting lots.
And remains in the township.
And remains in the township ownership. So the only
So
piece being
if we
conveyed,
approve this, the light blue is approved.
correct, to go
Thank
to
you.
lot 12, and that's it.
Thank you, needed that clarity.
All right. Any others before I pass it over to the clerk? Okay, Madam Clerk.
Let the record show a recorded vote was requested by Councillor Graziano. Councillor Graziano, how do you vote?
No.
Councillor Hazelton, how do you vote?
No.
Councillor Jarvis, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councillor Predko, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councillor Bocek, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councillor Cooper, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mayor Kutsier, how do you vote?
Yes.
Let the record show the motion's carried 5-2.
All right, thank you very much. And now we go on to the Planning Act public meetings portion of our meeting. Which means I have to read a little speech. This morning, there is a public meeting scheduled for 3 proposed zoning bylaw amendments. I will briefly summarize the procedure to be utilized for the meeting. First, the clerk will advise council as to when, how, and to whom notice of the public meeting was circulated for the proposed amendments being considered. The clerk will also advise of the appeal procedures. Next, staff will advise of the purpose and effect of the bylaws and provide any other information that is relevant to the applications, and the clerk will summarize any correspondence on file. Excuse me. From there, the public will have an opportunity to provide comments on the amendments being considered. Please be respectful of time and be concise with your comments. All commentators are requested to state their name and address and sign in on the sheet provided. After the public discussion, the public meeting will be closed. Council will then have an opportunity to provide comments for clarification. I now declare this meeting to be a public meeting pursuant to Section 34 of the Planning Act to deal with the following proposed amendments. A, zoning bylaw amendment file Z24-12 for 2 Island 2170 Georgian Bay, Jamie Clarke and Megan Carney. B, zoning bylaw amendment file number Z24-13 for 182 Wild Rice Trail, Kayla Thompson. And C, zoning bylaw amendment file Z24-16 for 46 Clerks Road, Robert Richard Lashbrook. To the clerk.
Notice of the public meeting was sent by first-class mail to the respective owners and assessed persons within 120 to 800 meters of the property subject to the proposed applications, and to those persons and agencies likely to have an interest in the applications. These notices were sent at least 30 days prior to this morning's meeting. Included in each notice was an explanation of the purpose and effect of the proposed applications, and a key map showing the location of the properties or a description of the lands to be affected by the proposed amendments. Other relevant information may have also been provided. These circulations were all provided in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act and the Township of Georgian Bay Official Plan. Members of the public are advised at this point that unless they make an oral or written submission to council before council makes a decision on these applications, that any subsequent appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal may be dismissed by the tribunal. Anyone who wishes to be notified of council's decision respecting the proposed zoning bylaw amendments must submit a written request to the Planning Department.
We could go back to the, I think we want to go to the cave. Doing now. So the first application is for the zoning bylaw amendment Z24-12 for 2 Island 2170 Clarke and Carney, and Ms. McCabe. I believe this is your file.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good morning, Your Worship, and members of council. If I could share my screen. It's saying it's not turned on. There you go.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, if I could have your attention.
Yes.
My screen shows from the Township of Georgian Bay that I'm going to be removed from this meeting. It says from G.I. Joe, Township of Georgian Bay.
No,
Please update your name.
Unless you have a new name. Oh, well. We can debate that, but we're not going to. Ms. McKay, I'm going to get it back to you and get this back under control.
Thank you, Your Worship. Application Z2412 is before you this morning for a statutory public meeting. The property is 2 Island 2170. The subject property, just one second here, sorry, I just have to move something so I can read. There we go. The subject property, municipally known as 2 Island 2170, is located within the community of Cognisheen, within Freddie Channel in Georgian Bay. The island property has a lot area of approximately 9,014 square meters, or 2.23 acres. The property is currently developed with a 2-bedroom seasonal dwelling in the southeast portion of the island, and the dwelling was constructed in 1936 and has a legal non-complying front yard setback of 2.5 meters to the high water mark, which, as you know, is 177.4. Additionally, there are 2 accessory storage sheds and a dock along the east portion of the island. The natural shoreline is characterized by a mix of open rock outcrops and areas of vegetation. The surrounding land uses include low-density seasonal residential dwellings on shoreline properties to the north, west, and within Freddie Channel. In June 2024, a pre-application consultation was submitted by Morgan Planning and Development for an addition to an existing dwelling and deck. The property subject to the request is an island property in the Cognisheen waterfront community. In 2021, the subject property obtained both an official plan amendment and a zoning bylaw amendment to permit the construction of a new dwelling in the central area of the island, which was not constructed. Subsequent to the adoption of the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment, a site plan agreement was entered into between the owners and the township and is registered untitled. It has been determined by the owners that in addition to the existing dwelling is the preferred development proposal due to the increase of building costs in the last few years. A zoning bylaw amendment application is appropriate to modify the existing site-specific exceptions to allow for the modified development proposal. The existing dwelling does not meet the required front yard setback to the water, therefore it is considered legal non-complying as part of the township zoning bylaw. As the existing dwelling is located 2.5 meters from the high water mark at its closest point, the proposed expansions must not encroach any further into the existing front yard, and the gross floor area, height, and width of the dwelling would be limited based on the reduced setback. This application seeks to allow for the proposed addition and deck extension to exceed the limits for gross floor area and width, and recognize existing development through a site-specific zoning exception. The zoning bylaw amendment proposes an addition to the existing dwelling, which you can see on the screen is in this area of the subject property, and an expansion of the existing deck. The existing dwelling does not meet the required front yard setback to the water. Therefore, as stated previously, it is considered legal non-complying. The proposed dwelling addition and deck extension are located to the rear, and which is the west of the existing dwelling, and are not proposed to encroach further into the existing minimum front yard. The proposed dwelling addition would add approximately 65 square meters of gross floor area to the dwelling, resulting in a total gross floor area of 145.9 square meters. The proposed addition to the existing deck would add approximately 16.4 square meters of area to the existing deck. The proposed addition and extension will allow the property owners to modestly expand the footprint of the existing dwelling to allow for additional living space and a second washroom. Section F510 of the Township's official plan outlines policies specific to the Cognisheen waterfront community. Water-oriented recreational uses, including single detached dwellings, are permitted uses within this designation. Section F510.8 states, the size and number of buildings combined with their location on a site have a direct impact on the visual character of the waterfront community. To protect the visual character of the waterfront community and maintain an appropriate balance between the natural and built form, the size of buildings should generally be proportionate to the size of the lot on which they are located. The policy also sets standards for the gross floor area, width, and height of the dwellings, as well as lot coverage. The proposed addition to the existing dwelling conforms to the existing dwelling policies. The design of new buildings should blend in with the natural landscape of the area and have a complementary design relationship with existing buildings while maintaining a diversity of architectural styles, building materials, and encouraging innovative built forms. When considering Planning Act applications for development in the Cognizine waterfront community, Section F510.817 requires that particular regard will be given to ensuring that the character of the waterfront community is maintained, the sensitive natural heritage will not be adversely impacted, and the visual impact of the development will not be significant. In evaluating the visual impact, regard will be had for the impact on both neighboring properties and the Bay community in general. The island, subject to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment, was rezoned as stated in 2021 to a site-specific zone being Cognizine Shoreline Residential Island Exception 63 Holding. This site-specific zone was enacted to permit the construction of a new dwelling and the conversion of an existing dwelling to a sleeping cabin. The hold was removed from the property by Bylaw 2022-36. The proposed zoning bylaw amendment is to replace the existing site-specific SRI 7-63 zoning provisions to allow for a 65 square meter addition to the existing dwelling and a 16.4 square meter extension of the existing deck. The intent is to also recognize existing non-complying setbacks. The public meeting this morning is only for the purposes of conveying information and gathering comments. The public meeting allows for ongoing dialogue with the public, agent, owner, council, the district, and commenting agencies or special persons. Should the dialogue result in significant revisions of the development proposed by the application, an additional public meeting may be required under the Planning Act. Otherwise, the planning analysis and evaluation report with recommendations shall be presented to council at a future meeting after comments are addressed.
All right, thank you very much. Madam Clerk, any correspondence on file, please?
Correspondence related to zoning bylaw amendment file Z24-12 was received as follows. One letter was received from the District of Muskoka stating they are not opposed given that council is satisfied with the setbacks proposed and that at the time a site plan control is implemented, it is used to address phosphorus management, stormwater management, and vegetation retention and replanting, and that a net improvement to water quality is achieved. 2 letters were received stating they have no objection to this application by Brian Neely and Tennessee and Neil Bryden. 1 letter was received from Leslie Allison stating no objection to the application, assuming the proposed addition is aesthetically suitable and in keeping with the nature of the cottages in the neighborhood.
Thank you very much. Is the applicant or their agent present? Ms. Lemieux, I think you know the routine.
Good morning, Your Worship and Council, and members of the public who may be watching and also in person. My name is Victoria Lemieux. I'm the agent for Jamie Clarke and Megan Carney, the owners of this property. Our mailing address is 21 Matchadash Street South, Unit 101, Orillia, Ontario, L3V1M1. I just wanted to say thank you to the Manager of Planning for that detailed presentation. I won't take up too much of Council's time because I believe she was very thorough in that, but I would like to jump to slide 7 if I could, Madam Clerk, just to reiterate a couple of items. I'm sure a number of Council remember the previous applications for this property back in 2021, and I just wanted to reiterate for Council and of course members of the public as well. So what you see on your screen is the site plan approved drawing for the property. So as the Manager of Planning was mentioning, that central cottage is essentially what was approved through that 2021 official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment. What this application now, this new application will be doing is essentially eliminating that approval altogether. So there would no longer be any approval for a centralized cottage. This would only permit the expansion as described by the manager on that existing structure. It would also eliminate the approval for a sleeping cabin to be 2.5 meters from the water. So in the previous application, the intent was that existing cottage that you saw in the photos would be converted to a sleeping cabin. That no longer also would be permitted. So this is, I think, a bit of a rare case for council to see actually a reduction in proposed development being applied for by an applicant. But in this case, as mentioned, overall cost of construction and labor has brought the owners to this position where they would prefer to just add on a little bit more living space onto the existing structure instead. So no further approvals would be permitted. And essentially we're eliminating that 2021 approval. And just to further reiterate, we did submit a planning justification report to the township providing a detailed policy analysis. And it is my professional opinion that I believe that this modest expansion is reasonable, will not create any negative impact to the surrounding area, and again, maintain that existing character of that existing blue cottage that you saw in the photo. So any questions or comments, I am here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak to this, either in person or online? I don't know if we have any attendees online that are... Okay. And I don't see, if anybody online wants to speak to this, they are required to raise their hand. Otherwise, I'm turning it over to council. All right, Councillor Bocek, we're going to go to you at this point, please.
Thank you. And through you, Mayor, I'd like to address my question to Deb from Planning. I noticed in the drawings reviewing the other night that there was the elevation lines behind the existing non-conforming cottage were quite close together, which leads me to believe that the incline is quite steep behind the cottage. And my understanding is that in the ward that covers Cognisheen, we have a blasting bylaw that does not allow you to blast out the rock, which would allow you to move this further back and make a good view from the canoe. So the bylaw is impeding this from moving back. My question is there a possibility to move this back further to meet or come closer to our setbacks, or does the existing rock behind the cottage impede that, and that's why it would be legal non-conforming? Thank you.
Through you, Your Worship. You are correct that the contours that are identified on the overall site plan are quite close together. It is an existing building, as it has been noted, and we are just adding a small addition to it. However, I do understand what you're saying, and based on those contours and what I looked at, I would have to agree that it's quite a substantial elevation difference. So maybe Ms. Lemieux can just verify anything in regards to the potential of moving it back farther, because I'm not aware of any sort of comments in regards to that.
Ms. Lemieux.
Through your worship to Councillor Bocek, my understanding, and I will also ask the owners, Jamie and Megan, if they are wanting to also further to my comments. My understanding is they have worked with a contractor already to understand if that addition is feasible without doing, you know, any further damage or what have you. They've done their homework here to make sure that this is a feasible, you know, development concept to actually bring into fruition. In regards to moving the cottage back, again, that goes back to the overall extensive cost of construction, not being able to utilize that existing footprint, as well as the overall, you know, rock outcropping, mature vegetation that they're not wanting to impede on. They don't, like a lot of rocks out in Georgian Bay, there's not a lot of vegetation that's there, and they want to be able to keep as much as they can. So that's my understanding as to why they're hoping to use this existing footprint that they have to not take that away. But if Jamie or Megan have any further comments, I'll ask them to raise their hand.
Oh. All right, so we're just going to get the applicant moved over.
Ms. Carney, if you could accept the promotion to panelists. There we go.
We can take the screen sharing down. Ms.
Oh,
Carney?
good morning, everyone. Thanks for your patience while I came online there. No, actually, I just wanted to thank Victoria and just reiterate what she was saying, that we wanted to have as little impact on our property as possible, which is why we would really like to maintain our current footprint and have no interest in moving it further back at this point in time. But thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper, please.
I have a few questions that I'd like clarified. Did I hear you, planner Deb, say something about when this structure was built?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, it's 1936 was the house.
So just for clarification, it wasn't built in 1936.
Through you, your worship, that's what the data I received from MPAC. So
what they're referring to is a floating boathouse that was towed up on this shoreline around that period of time. So I just wanted to clarify that the structure that's there was built maybe 10 or 15, maybe 15 years ago. And the reason being is that the boathouse, which was there for, God, I don't know, in my youth and past, that's a long time ago, by the way. It was a lovely structure, two-story, very large floating boathouse that many families had in those days. Even had a roof deck, so it was really a three-story, almost a three-story building. So, and it was towed up on shore. So my guess is that I think when this approval was applied for this particular cabin, that basically it was allowed to be where it is because that's where the boathouse was. It was towed up on shore in the same location. So I just wanted to sort of update your file for you. I can't tell you the year that this was built, but you know, probably in the 1990s or something like that. That's sort of when the fire was. We could probably find out, but doesn't really have much bearing other than the fact that I want to understand that if that was the case, this building that's there was a replacement for an existing structure, which would mean, would it not, that they're allowed to be there this close to the shoreline because of it was a replacement structure. Is that correct?
through you, your worship, yes, that's correct. It would be legal non-compliant.
So
Yep.
to say they could move it, yes, maybe they could move it, but there's nothing that would require them from our set of rules to move it. Is that?
That's correct.
Okay. So with that in mind, I sort of understand the reason for an addition. I wish it was a better setback, but it is what it is. I guess the building could, in theory, be moved in the winter and over to the cleared site, but it's not being done and they're not required to do that. So I think that is reasonable. I just want to understand, though, that in terms of if we give not approval today, I understand you're just gathering information, but when and if we give approval, there would be a new OP addition to the OP, is that correct, to approve this, or would it be a bylaw? It'd be a bylaw.
Yes, correct. Through you, your worship, it would be a zoning bylaw amendment, and they would also have to amend their site plan agreement that's registered on title.
Magic words there too. I'm not sure I read that in the report, and
yeah, definitely.
I wanted to say that so the current site plan agreement would be removed and replaced by a different site plan agreement.
That's correct.
So that in the future, if this property were sold, somebody couldn't come along and build the other structure and end up with two dwellings on one property that is 2.3 acres, which doesn't qualify at all for.
That's correct. Yeah.
For two dwellings.
That's correct.
Okay, so as long as the site plan agreement is included in that, and was that in the report? I'm not. Oh, it was. I'm sorry, I missed that.
That's okay.
But I think it's worthy of bringing to the surface. And you also said that there would be no, as part of the site plan or part of the bylaw, there would not be an allowance for a sleeping cabin. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. I think I've satisfied my concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis, please.
Yeah, I appreciate the clarifications to Councillor Cooper's questions through the mayor. My only one concern is the concern brought to our attention by Councillor Bocek and that, and maybe Ms. Carney can help us here. The addition, Megan, is on ground that is significantly higher than where the current building is, and would show you'd be building up as well. I presume if talking about the view from the canoe, the addition would be seen from the water as being sort of up and behind the current structure. Is that correct? Do you think? Or would you be just doing one roof for the whole thing?
We would just be doing one roof for the whole thing. So we would be making it as seamless as possible.
And to your knowledge, no blasting is required?
No, we want to avoid blasting at all costs, literally.
Yeah, appreciate it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pretko, please.
Thank you. And through your worship, just a question to our planner, Ms. McCabe. First of all, I just wanted to comment, there is a photo, a site photo of the side of the cottage where you can see the back, and it looks like the cottage is on high ground. So I think it was in Ms. McCabe's presentation as one of the photos, but it's also page 25 of the zoning amendment report. But anyway, we have a zoning application for this, Ms. McCabe, and if this application hadn't already gone through with the zoning amendment and a site plan control on the property, if this was the original proposal that had come forward, would you have brought this forward as a minor variance, or would you still maintain this as a zoning application?
Through you, your worship, I would definitely have brought it forward through a zoning amendment application due to the fact that there's a site-specific zoning on it. And we as a planning team here feel it's beneficial to go through the process of a zoning bylaw amendment.
Okay, but I guess my question was, if there wasn't a site plan control on it.
Yes, I would still consider it through a zoning bylaw amendment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the council? I'm not seeing any other hands. Yeah, I know. I appreciate that after the, let me call it, I dare say, the dreams of 2021, and then the quotes on that there was probably a big gulp and a modified plan. And I think what's important for me in some strange way is the fact that in the approvals that we gave a few years back, this cottage was going to be allowed to remain. So it's not like we said, okay, you can go ahead and build a new one, but you have to get rid of this. No, they were allowed to keep this cottage as a sleeping cabin. So this is not going to affect the view of most of the people going by the island. It's what's being built is farther back from the water than the existing. So in my mind, it's a modest addition. We're still going to have a modest cottage overall compared to some of the new builds we're seeing. And I personally have no difficulty with it. And with that, I'm going to read a motion. And I have moved by Councillor Graziano. There he is. And seconded by Councillor Cooper. Be it resolved that Council for the Township of Georgian Bay, 1, accepts all information presented at the public meeting on November 5th, 2024 regarding Township Zoning Bylaw Amendment Z24-12 regarding the proposed rezoning of 2 Island 2170. And 2, refers all information to Township staff for further discussion and review with all participants and correspondence at the public meeting. And 3, Township staff shall not schedule the next meeting of Council to consider the application until participants and correspondence at the public meeting have ample time to provide written comments and concerns if applicable. Councillor Cooper.
I'm certainly going to be I'm approving this, or hopefully.
You're voting in favor anyway.
I am voting in favor, and I thought hopefully this will work. But I just wanted to say that I'm going to send the planning department and the planner and our council a picture that's just been forwarded to me of the actual floating boathouse because you've got it now?
Because it's really topical.
The reason it's topical for the floating boathouse issue, and in this particular case, this boathouse was pulled up on shore. They did have a septic system, and unfortunately had a fire. But I thought it was relevant to something that we've been discussing. And there you go. This is and with that roof deck that I was mentioning, and a screened-in veranda at the front, and blah blah blah. So.
Point of clarification, Mr. Mayor.
Absolutely.
This is not a boathouse. It was a houseboat.
I beg your pardon. You're absolutely right. It's a houseboat.
Yeah.
And it was actually owned by the Lieutenant Governor of Ontario.
Right up, wasn't it?
Right up, yes. There you go.
All right. With that little bit of history, I still haven't called for a vote on this motion, so I hope I don't have to read it again. I'm going to say all those in favor. And I got everybody, that's unanimous. You could.
Thank you, through your mayor. I just wanted to make a point here that how much the inland councillors appreciate your knowledge out on the bay, because we don't have the ability to get out there and visit these properties. So we have to rely on the councillors out there. And thank you for being so expert on this. It's appreciated.
As you well can appreciate, the historical perspective is very informative.
Huge.
It's impressive you remember 1936.
Well, yeah, not all of us were around in Yeah. Okay. With all that, let's go on to our second application. And so that is, let's introduce it properly here. Zoning bylaw amendment Z24-13 for 182 Wild Rice Trail, Thompson. And Mr. Donaldson, I believe you'll be making the presentation for us.
Thank you, and through the mayor, I'll just get my presentation up and rolling here. The following presentation is for a statutory public meeting regarding zoning bylaw amendment application Z24-13 for the rezoning of the lands municipally known as 182 Wild Rice Trail in the Township of Georgian Bay, District Municipality of Muskoka. The subject property is situated with frontage onto 6 Mile Lake with private road access via Wild Rice Trail. The lands are characterized by dense vegetation throughout, with the majority of the property being in a natural state. The lands have an approximate area of 2.7 acres with a frontage of 61 meters. Currently, there are 2 sheds and 2 docks located on the property that are to be removed. The purpose and effect of the proposed zoning bylaw is to rezone the lands from 6 Mile Lake Residential Exception 1 to a 6 Mile Lake Residential Exception Zone to permit a property having a lot coverage of 12.2% within 60 meters of the high water mark, a dwelling with a gross floor area of 521 square meters with a width of 28.5 meters, and a boathouse and dock having a projection of 15 meters. The 6 Mile Lake Residential Exception 1 zone was enacted to maintain appropriate setbacks between the sensitive environmental features along the shoreline and any proposed residential development. The proposed amendment before you today seeks to maintain the 30-meter setback, citing the future dwelling 33 meters from the shoreline. Official Plan Amendment number 22 speaks to the size of dwelling units within the 6 Mile Lake waterfront community in relation to visual impact. The following is direct wording from the amendment. The size of a dwelling, combined with its location on site, will have a direct effect on the environmental and visual impact of the development. Variances to the established maximum size and/or width of the dwelling may be considered where the applicant provides evidence satisfactory to the township that the dwelling will maintain and enhance the natural form of the area, the visual impact of the dwelling will not be significant, and is in accordance with all other applicable policies of this plan, including the 6 Mile Lake goals, basis, principles, and environmental policies. The proposal seeks to adhere to this official plan through the retention of the majority of the property in its natural state, including the front yard setback and the shoreline area, appropriate yard setbacks, and retention of the natural shoreline and existing wetlands at the midpoint of the property. In the process of preparing the pre-application consultation memo for this development, staff identified the presence of both type 1 and type 2 fish habitats along the shoreline of the subject property. The applicant was required to submit a fish habitat assessment as their proposed development was within 120 meters of the identified type 1 habitat. The fish habitat assessment by Riverstone Environmental Solutions was attached to the report distributed to Council for review. This assessment has since been peer-reviewed by Hutchinson Environmental Sciences. Hutchinson's findings and recommendations were generally consistent with those proposed by Riverstone, being locating the dock and boathouse 5 meters from the shoreline, observing the warm water timing window, limiting vegetation removal during the bird breeding window, leaving all in-water habitat features undisturbed, setting all land-based development and site alteration a minimum of 30 meters from the type 1 habitat, and maintaining the vegetation within the 30-meter buffer in its natural state. The further technical comments that were provided by Hutchinson were regarding tree removal during migratory bird nesting seasons, additional sediment fencing to be installed in relation to the identified wetland, the installation of a culvert for the point the driveway crosses the wetland, and general notes regarding information presentation and policy reference. This public meeting is only for the purposes of conveying information and gathering comments. The public meeting allows for ongoing dialogue with the public agent, owner, council, district, and commenting agencies or special persons. Should the dialogue result in significant revisions to the development proposed by the application, an additional public meeting may be required under the Planning Act. Otherwise, the planning analysis and evaluation report with recommendations shall be presented to the council at a future meeting after comments are addressed. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your report. Madam Clerk, any correspondence to let us know about?
Correspondence relating to zoning bylaw amendment file Z24-13 was received as follows. One letter was received from the District of Muskoka stating they would not be opposed to the application provided that appropriate development control techniques are used to implement the recommendations of the fish habitat assessment prepared by Riverstone Environmental Solutions, Inc., dated August 2024, respecting docking, boathouse, and dwelling envelopes, vegetation retention, and removal best practices and construction mitigation measures. One letter was received from Andre Friend stating he has no objection to the application.
Thank you. Is the applicant or agent present, and do they wish to make any comments?
The agent is online and being brought over.
Thank you.
Good morning, members of the council. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead, Mr. Veritas.
My name is Savas Veritas. I'm the principal planner from Plan Muskoka, Inc. In Huntsville. I'm here this morning representing the applicants as their agent, and I'm a registered professional planner. I don't have a lot to add to Mr. Donaldson's presentation. I think he covered the details of the application fairly accurately. I do want to just reiterate a couple points and just make a couple points of justification that we provided in more detail in our planning justification report that was submitted with the proposal. So the the 4 items that are requiring exceptions for this proposed construction of a new dwelling on the subject lands is a lot coverage increase of 12 to 12.2% within 60 meters of the waterfront, a gross floor area increase to 521 square meters for the dwelling, a dwelling width increase to 28.4 meters, and a boathouse and dock projection of 15 meters. In terms of lot coverage, starting with that, lot coverage, as council is likely aware, is designed to prevent development from overpowering natural landscapes. So it seeks to basically set a balance between built form and natural form on the subject lands. As Mr. Donaldson had mentioned, the property is very well vegetated. It's primarily in its natural state. And the proposal itself, when measured overall over the entire property, is actually only 4.1%. It's only when you take the measurement within 60 meters where you have the variance being requested to 12.2%. So you can see that the actual dwelling and boathouse combined itself in total do not overpower or fall well within the limits set by the township for lot coverage. It's just that the building itself is located within 200 feet, and that measurement is requiring a variance. When you look at the way that the dwelling is being situated on the property, which is somewhat centrally between the two property lines and quite a bit further back from the water than we normally see at 33 meters, these measures, along with retention of vegetation on both sides of and behind and the front of the dwelling, with the shoreline buffer of 30 meters, will hopefully mitigate, in my opinion, the additional coverage that's being requested for the measurement within 60 meters. In terms of the gross floor area width and dwelling width, those are two provisions that were pulled from a previous official plan policies that have now been replaced by the township. So the zoning bylaw has not been updated to reflect those changes to the official plan. So this bylaw, in fact, seeks relief to sections of an official plan that's no longer in force in effect. So that those two are somewhat technical in my opinion. That said, the width of the structure does not appear out of character with the area. It again is centrally located, and the actual width of the structure is a little bit exaggerated because there's a screen porch located on the front corner of the property of the building that is basically driving most of this width increase beyond the zoning bylaw's current regulations. Visually, when you look at the proposal, it's only a 1.5 story dwelling, so it's going to be fairly low profile below the tree line. And again, when you mix that in with the increased front yard setback and the buffer of 30 meters being retained along the shoreline, those types of buffers will help mitigate the visual impacts of the proposal. In terms of the boathouse and dock, the longer projection proposed is really truly just to implement the recommendations made by the fish habitat assessment, which is to locate the boathouse itself 5 meters from the shoreline. So when you push it out 5 meters to start, you end up with a little bit of projection increase that's being proposed. 15 meters is not by any means going to cause any navigational concerns. It's a fairly consistent dock and boathouse projection across all our lakes in the area. So we feel that will be in character, and it obviously mitigate or implements the recommendations made by Riverstone Environmental. And just to, on a final note, the peer review, as stated by Mr. Donaldson, came back supportive of Riverstone's findings. So we're in the process of amending the peer review, or sorry, the EIS that is being prepared in order to reflect the proposed technical changes that the peer reviewer has requested of Riverstone, and that will be submitted to staff shortly and hopefully in time for the next meeting date agenda. So that's all I really have to add. I'd be happy to answer any questions. The applicants themselves are present as well too, if you have any questions directed directly for them. Thank you.
Mr. Moranis, thank you very much for your presentation. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak to this? Nobody online? All right. Are there any members of council who have any comments or questions with regards to this application? Councillor Bocek, please.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor, I just have a couple of points here, and one of clarification to the planner involved. I heard you say that the projection of the dock was such that it would extend beyond the fish habitat that is protected. Am I correct in that?
Through the mayor, I could answer that as well. That's correct. It's to be accessed by a 5 meter long boardwalk that will extend from the shoreline, basically going over the protected fish habitat to site it outside of the fish habitat.
Okay, that's fine. I know in many cases on 6 Mile Lake, I see, as a matter of fact, a former councillor here, when I went to visit him, I went to the wrong spot of his dock and I was in the fish habitat. So I get that very much. My other question or concern is, we, in a case like this, reach out to the neighbors within a certain number of meters on either side or adjacent to. My question is, and I don't know the answer to this, is do you reach out to the applicable cottage associations for their comments? In other words, on 6 Mile Lake, there's 2 different associations, And I'm just wondering if we get their input as well.
Through the mayor, the cottage associations for the applicable lake that the proposal is being proposed on, they are reached out to. That is
Okay,
correct.
great. Thank you. That's all my questions.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis, please.
Yeah, I know that you, it's our planner, Andrew, it is proposed that there'll be site plan control with regards specifically to the shoreline, which is of concern to me. If I were building over 500 square meters of building, I probably would like to have a nice clean waterfront as well with lawn and beach. And I can't see how somebody with this proponent would not want to have that. So I'm a little surprised that there doesn't seem to be a conflict here, but I think we need to make sure we have good site plan control in place so that only the boathouse has been recommended is built. I find it mind-boggling that somebody wants to build something that big on a piece of cottage property, but that's their business. Yeah, I'm really concerned in making sure that site plan control is there and can be controlled. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor. A few questions and observations. This is a big structure, my goodness, and that's allowed on 6 Mile Lake today, is that correct? It's 5,500 square feet about, have I got that right?
Through the mayor, the policies that are being buried have to do with the gross floor area of the 6 Mile Lake dwellings. So they're requiring a variance because it is greater than allowed for in our zoning bylaw for a 6 Mile Lake dwelling.
Wow, and what is the ratio of frontage of, in other words, you probably noted this, but I just want to understand. The building is about 40% of all the frontage, 50% of all the frontage, or maybe even more than that. Can you tell me?
Through the mayor, I don't have that exact calculation in front of me. I'm not sure if the planner on file on the applicant side does. I could look into that though.
Well, just if it is that not required to examine something like that? That I know in some of our plans it requires you to be no more than 25 or 10 or 15 or 20% of the total frontage. This is almost half of it.
Director Whitlam.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. While Mr. Donaldson is looking up some file information, just a reminder, we are at the public meeting stage at this time, so these comments and these questions and information are very useful, and they'll factor into the future planning analysis. So no conclusions or recommendations regarding the application have been drawn at this point. So useful information. So whether we have that available at the moment or not, questions well taken and will be taken into consideration when staff further review this.
So I do have a...
Well, can I just make a comment to that?
Oh, sorry.
I noticed that the side yard setbacks, when you add the two of them together, you're getting roughly 90, maybe 100, and the building itself is 93. So yeah, you're not
50%.
Yeah.
It's pretty significant. So anyway, I just wanted to raise that, but I do, if you don't mind, just a couple of other things. This is going to really sound picayune. I'm sorry for that, but it just in the interest of what I consider to be accuracy, maybe I'm wrong, but I would like us to look into this with our future OP and zoning bylaw amendments. The terminology high water mark, the terminology regulated watermark, and spring flooding. They're all different things. And I happen to think that the term high water mark generally, in my sort of experience with the planning, applies to the Great Lakes, where there are long-term swings in water levels. So I just wanted to draw that to your attention as something that we should, I know it sounds picayune, but I think we need to use the right terms. And I see here we're using high water mark and regulated watermark, and our former councilor that was just being referred to at 6 Mile Lake by Councillor Vocek made it very clear during my planning days with that councilor that there was a regulated, not high water mark on 6 Mile Lake. So I just wanted to draw that to your attention and recognize that some of the inland lakes, by the way, what was also pointed out to us, are not regulated, so they have spring flooding. The spring flooding is a very different thing from a high water mark. So I hope that, I know it sounds picayune, but I think it's in the interest of understanding different ways that water levels change or don't change. And planning should pay attention, I think, to that matter. Anyway, that's all for now. Thanks.
For my education, picune?
Picayune?
Picune? P-I-C-U-N-E?
Well, yeah, I don't know how to spell it, but being picky.
Yeah, okay. it was a new word for me. I was curious.
Make note.
Yes. Councillor Predko, please.
Thank you. Well, I was going to make the same picky comment that Councillor Cooper was going to make, because I'm just curious on the site plan we have the excerpt from in the agent's report. The high water line is below the regulated water line, which doesn't seem to make sense to me, but I'm sure that will get reviewed by the time this is coming as a final zoning application. My only other question was, again, either to Andrew or our applicant's agent, with the location of the dock, trying to minimize the impact to the fish habitats, and are you confident that you're locating this in the least destructive location? And as I look across at the report, it looks like the fish habitat goes all the way along. But are you sure that this is the most beneficial or least impactful location?
Through the mayor, and I don't know if the applicant's agent wants to further this, through the online mapping that I've looked at, the majority of the type 1 fish habitat is to the northern portion of the shoreline, with the type 2 fish habitat being more to the southern portion. The applicant is suggesting that the boathouse and dock be sited as close to that southern side lot line as possible to avoid the fish habitat type 1 as much as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hazelton, please.
Similar question. And I was looking at our zoning online mapping system, and I saw that the F1 habitat was to the north. Again, sadly, I am colorblind, and I now see that there are two different types of fish habitat on the applicant's or the consultant's drawing, and it may be showing what the online mapping system is showing, but I guess when I first looked at it, it looked like there was fish habitat significantly in front of the property. But from what I think I just heard you say, if I take the southern 3/4 of the waterfront, we're not looking at F1 habitat. That was my concern, and I was confused with this other drawing, but thank you for that clarity.
Councillor Graziano, at one point I saw your hand and it disappeared. I'm just going to check in with you before I go to Councillor Bocek, because he's already spoken in this round.
No, I was going to simply make a comment with respect to, I know Wild Rice Trail well. I travel it on a very frequent basis, as well as I boat to the Inner Bay. I have not heard any neighbors to date raise any concerns with regards to what is being proposed. And by now I would have likely received a bunch of emails. So it's not to say that staff haven't received any letters, but from what I've come to understand, there's not a large concern with regards to those that live on Wild Rice Trail at this point. Thank you.
I'm going to make a couple comments, Councillor Bocek, before I go over to you. And appreciate all the work that's gone into this and all the fish habitat studies and that sort of stuff. But I think it's important for us to acknowledge that the proposed build is ballparking almost double what we're past limits. And therefore, I think we have to recognize that with the modification to the official plan, and that the, I'll call it environmental setting around this large build is going. I think it's going to be very important, very significant that we do ensure that a fair bit of the greenery remains, the natural environment between the build and the shoreline, because if it were to be clear cut and put over with grass planted or something, it would have a massive visual impact, to say nothing about the runoff into the lake and all the circumstances. And so to me, because this is one of the, I think one of the first applications of this size, following the change to our official plan, I think we have to be very careful that we make sure, if you are going to, in your report, recommend approval, that there are conditions on that make it keep the lot as natural as possible under the circumstances. That's my comment. Councillor Bocek, please.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. My question is going to be to our planning department, anybody who wants to entertain this. My understanding is that there was a request to make an official plan amendment by 6 Mile Lake Ratepayers Alliance, which the current square footage allowed, correct me if I'm wrong, is 175 square meters, or roughly 3,500 square feet is the current bylaw that's in place. There is a amendment that in the official plan that is scheduled to increase that amount, as far as I understand. I could be wrong, but I'm wondering if we're not setting a precedence here of allowing a bigger build than what is currently in our bylaws, and this sets precedence for or gives strength to one organization who's trying to increase the size through an official plan amendment. So your comments on that, because probably I'm not as educated as I should be on it. Thank you. Director Whitley.
Yeah. Thank you. Through the mayor to Councillor Bocek and the rest of council. I'll begin. And so Amendment 22 to the official plan was adopted by this council last year to 6 Mile Lake and approved by the district. So that amendment contains a number of policies, very important policies against which this proposal will be evaluated. Those are the new sort of tests against which these proposals are evaluated. And rather than prescribe a specific floor area cap or something like that, Amendment 22 allowed for consideration and flexibility depending on the context and the mitigation measures. You know, for example, we heard the mayor talk about, you know, maintaining, preserving natural, or requiring a natural shoreline or buffering around the construction. So Amendment 22 allows us to consider these site-specific developments and weigh them against the overall context in terms of compatibility with the surrounding built form, visual impacts, impacts on natural heritage, etc. I think what Councillor Bocek might have been referring to is the next step with respect to 6 Mile Lake is, with official plan amendment 22 in place, would be to bring forward a set of zoning regulations for the 6 Mile Lake area. That's the piece we haven't completed yet, and Planner Kratke of this department has spoken to this council in the past about it, and there's some data issues we're working through with MPAC in order to do the appropriate background analysis to come up with some specific zoning. So that's where you may see some different structure around floor areas and more details. But right now, Amendment 22 does not provide or have a cap, but it allows for flexibility, but it's very contextual to meeting all those 6 Mile Lake objectives that we're trying to achieve here. So it allows for the consideration of this application in context to that. But again, no conclusions or opinions have been formed by this planning department yet with respect to this specific application.
And therefore the current zoning does apply, and therefore you need the variances from the current zoning. Yeah. Thank you. All right, Councillor Graziano.
Thank you. And you know, just to offer recognition where recognition is due, our mayor eloquently had stated something that I was strongly considering, in that whatever form this development takes, once it vets its way through council and through our process, I do believe that we need to find a way to preserve the natural shoreline. You know, we've endeavored to take our planning department out to 6 Mile Lake and understand the character of the lake. And we also have understood that there's a way to develop and develop responsibly while preserving the character of our lake and the shoreline and the aesthetic. And so I very much hope that as this returns back to council, that we are able to see that there is a site plan agreement has been identified, or some way for council to ensure that there is going to be local and natural vegetation that mitigates any nutrient runoff, you know, and any impacts to our water, as well as to the natural assets that we have within the area. So with that said, you know, I hope that the planner, the applicant's planner here today is understanding where council wishes to be and hopes to be, and I look forward to seeing what they return back with council once it continues to return and the discussion you know further. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Cooper.
Just for clarification, I wanted to understand what our director said about existing bylaws or former bylaws apply to size at the moment or not? If this were an application coming forward today, the former square footage cap for 6 Mile Lake was, as I understood it, 2,950 square feet, around 3,000 square feet. This is 86% higher than that.
So through the mayor to Councillor Cooper and the rest of council. So the former official plan policies do not apply. They were replaced by Amendment 22. The current zoning bylaw provisions that have been in place for some time still remain in effect, and that's why this application is an application to site specifically amend the zoning bylaw. We've seen the applicant's planner has provided a planning justification report, and it includes opinion that, in that planner's opinion, that the application conforms to Amendment 22, conforms to the official plan, but there is an amendment to the zoning bylaw that is under consideration right now. So that's why we're here. Yep. So the historic zoning that's been in effect for a number of years now remains in effect.
Thank you for the clarification on the zoning. I just wanted you to know that it's about 86% higher than what's in the bylaws. Thank you. 86.4, I think.
Thank you. Give or take. Councillor Hazelton.
I'm working on a question, but I got to find a page in the document first, and I'm struggling to find it here.
I'd happily go to somebody else, but they haven't put their hand up in the meantime.
Okay.
So we have to be patient.
Patience is a virtue, yes. Okay, so I am now looking at page 134 of the package. It is it looks like it's the consultant's natural heritage features, and it looks, I'm focused on this one because when I looked at the survey, it looked like the planned build is going to back onto a path of maybe a wetland or something, and then the road that will need to be accessed is going to be behind that. So am I right in that understanding?
Through the mayor, you're correct. The existing driveway already crosses through this wetland. The wetland isn't provincially significant. As one of the recommendations of Hutchinson's report was to see the addition of a culvert under this driveway to ensure that there is a mitigation of any potential impacts to that wetland.
So is that something that you have as part of a constraint or a plan, or is that just discussion at this point?
It was recommended that it be included in the revised form of the Riverstone environmental report, and that will be included in our site plan agreement that we'll be drafting up.
Okay, thank you. And you probably have covered it, but can I ask again, what comments have you received from either of the lake associations?
Through the mayor, no comments to date.
So I know that there is a change afoot here, but generally I would say if nobody's complaining and what is being designed here, situated and et cetera, seems to be reasonable, and we've had a peer review that suggests that the original Riverstone document is reasonable. It seems to me like there's mostly a green light on this thing. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands raised. I'm going to read the motion. I have moved by Councillor Bochek, seconded by Councillor Hazelton. Be it resolved that Council for the Township of Georgian Bay accepts all information presented at the public meeting on November 5, 2024 regarding Township Zoning Bylaw Amendment Z24-13 regarding the proposed rezoning of 182 Wild Rice Trail, and refers all information to Township staff for further discussion and review with all participants and correspondence at the public meeting. And Township staff shall not schedule the next meeting of Council to consider the application until participants and correspondents at the public meeting have ample time to provide written comments and concerns, if applicable. All those in favor? And I have a whole bunch of hands, so that is carried. And I'm going to propose a 10-minute break, and then we'll get to the final zoning bylaw amendment to be considered. And All right, next on the agenda is zoning bylaw amendment Z24-16 for 4 Clerks Road, Lashbrook. Ms. McCabe, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. The subject property, known as 4 Clerks Road, is comprised of approximately 5.46 hectares and a lot frontage of approximately 115.9 meters with vehicle access from Clerks Road. The property has an irregular shape with more than half of the lot extending around the rear of the abutting lots to the east, as you can see up on the screen. A private road that provides access to a few waterfront lots on nearby Toronto Lake traverses the easterly portion of the subject property. The neighboring properties to the east and west are primarily developed for both residential and rural uses. The abutting properties to the south and east front onto Toronto Lake and are developed waterfront lots. The adjacent property on the north side of Lake Joseph Road is zoned for residential uses and also environmental protection purposes. At the present time, there is a Quonset hut-style garage on a tool shed, a wood shed, and 5 storage containers on the property. The garage and the other structures are in a cleared area that provide access, parking, and space for occasional outdoor storage of landscaping materials such as mulch and flagstone. The remainder of the property is naturally forested and will remain in its natural state. In March 2024, a pre-application consultation request was received by the township as a result of a notice of violation issued on March 18, 2024, regarding the commercial use being undertaken on the property. The pre-application consultation outlined the requirements in order to continue the use on the property, and a zoning bylaw amendment and site plan agreement application was received by the township on September 17th of this year. The purpose of the application submitted is to rezone a portion of the property known as 4 Clerks Road to a site-specific zone to permit the continuation of the small-scale commercial use, which is a landscaping business with storage. The property is currently zoned residential type 1. Approval to construct the existing garage prior to the construction of a principal dwelling was granted in 2011 by the Committee of Adjustment through minor variance application A1211. At that time, the township planning report acknowledged that the owner had no immediate intention to build a dwelling on the subject property in recognition that the applicant resides on an adjacent lot. The applicant is the owner and operator of Northern Estates Landscaping. After the construction of the garage, the applicant began to use a portion of the subject property and the garage for the parking of the landscaping business's licensed vehicles, storage of landscaping equipment, and the occasional storage of materials such as mulch and flagstone. While the scale of the business has experienced some fluctuation since then, it has been scaled down in recent years, and the applicant aims to continue to operate the business as a small-scale operation that employs 3 to 4 local residents. A defining characteristic of the business use of the property is that there is no office on site, and the day-to-day operations of the business occurs off-site at the property of the clients. The zoning bylaw amendment proposes to rezone an approximate 0.6 hectare or 1.48 acre portion of the existing property, which is shown in gray up on the screen, to a site-specific zoning to permit an accessory small-scale commercial landscaping business use. A new definition will also be required to incorporate the establishment being a landscaping business, parking, and storage area as an accessory use to a future detached dwelling to be constructed on the property. The applicant intends to construct a dwelling on the subject property in the future, whereas at the present time, the applicant owns and resides at a neighboring property, which is known as 32 Clerks Road, and is located approximately 100 meters to the east of the subject lands. The administrative functions of the landscaping business are performed by the applicant in the dwelling located on this neighboring property. The subject property is currently identified as being part of the rural designation in the Township of Georgian Bay official plan and further designated as rural fringe. The rural designation encompasses a large area of the township. The rural designation is intended to recognize and preserve, where possible and practical, the natural landscape and rural characteristics of the area and permit rural resource uses while still permitting a limited range of compatible and complementary uses. The proposed small-scale landscaping business meets the intent of the above-noted policies due to its low impact on surrounding land uses and makes use of rural resource materials of the trade. Lands directly abutting the urban center to a distance of generally 1 kilometer shall be considered as the rural fringe area. Lands within the rural fringe area shall be primarily used for existing uses, rural resource uses, uses that require large amounts of land and residential development on existing lots. The proposed use is well suited to its present location as municipal services are not required, appropriate space is available for parking and indoor and outdoor storage, and compatibility is promoted by the distance between adjacent uses and vegetative buffers. The intent of the application is to permit a landscaping business parking and storage area comprised of, as I stated, 0.6 of a hectare on the subject lands as an accessory use to a permitted use. The way to achieve this is through a site-specific zoning bylaw amendment. Although the property has an R1 zoning, the property can be recognized as being within a rural area within an area of a number of uses, including both residential and commercial. In consideration of the property's size and natural forest cover, the character of the property is similar to properties that are in the rural zone where more intensive uses such as agriculture, forestry, pit, quarry, and home industries are permitted as of right. The proposed restrictions further define the use and establish perimeters to ensure the use will remain small scale and thereby compatible with residential uses on adjacent properties. If approved, the owner would also be required to enter into a site plan agreement with the municipality. A further level of restriction and assurance will be placed on the rezoned area as the agreement will be registered on title. The public meeting, as stated by both myself and Mr. Donaldson in previous slides, the public meeting today is only for purposes of conveying information and gathering comments. The public meeting allows for ongoing dialogue with the public, agent, owner, council, the district, and commenting agencies or other special persons. Should the dialogue result in a significant revision required of the development proposed by the application, an additional public meeting may be required under the Planning Act. Otherwise, the planning analysis and evaluation report with recommendations shall be presented to council at a future meeting after comments are addressed.
Thank you for that report. Madam Clerk, any correspondence we should know about?
Correspondence relating to zoning bylaw amendment file Z24-16 was received as follows. One letter was received from the District of Muskoka stating they have no objection.
Thank you very much. Is the applicant or agent present and wish to make any comments? Oh.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Robert Lashbrook, 4 Clerks Road. I do have an agent as well, Sam Sojan.
Okay. She's being brought. Yeah, okay. All right. Is it Soya?
Good morning. Sorry, I was being transferred over there and just joined as upgraded to panelist. Good morning. Yes, Your Worship, it's my name is Sam Soya. Good morning to the committee and township staff. I'm a senior planner at Tulloch at 80 Main Street West in Huntsville. And thank you to staff for your review of the application and for your detailed description of it in your report. I'll keep it short and just touch upon a few main points. As is detailed in my planning justification report, the purpose of the application is to permit an accessory small-scale rural commercial use defined as a landscaping business parking and storage area. In other words, a portion of the property is to be used by the applicant's existing small-scale local landscaping business to park several company vehicles and to occasionally store some materials. Ms. McCabe has already explained the small scale nature of this business, and it's important to recognize that this really is a low intensity use. There's no office on site and there's no ongoing on-site manufacturing or production, and the business operations occur almost exclusively directly on the properties of the business's clients. The business has only a handful of employees and there is no desire to increase the scale of the business. On-site structures include a garage, some storage containers, a tool shed, and a wood shed, and there's no further structural development proposed. The limited parking and storage is to be permitted within the only existing cleared area on the property. The balance of the property is to remain forested, and this existing forest vegetation also provides a buffer from neighboring properties. With regards to compatibility, this proposed use is well suited to the size of the property and is in character with the rural designation, and municipal services are not required, and the use is well set back and buffered from surrounding uses. As township staff have outlined, there's a number of very specific restrictions that are proposed. The intent of these restrictions is to ensure that the use only applies to a landscaping business, and that the small scale nature of this accessory use will be maintained for the long term. So more specifically, the definition ensures that the proposed parking and storage use is only permitted if it is associated with a landscaping business. Secondly, this use is only intended to function at the scale of an accessory use, and the construction of a primary dwelling will still be permitted. And then also it is proposed that the maximum number of employees using the parking and storage area be restricted to 6, and also that the maximum number of business vehicles that are parked there also be restricted to 6. On top of these restrictions, the owner is also going to be required to enter into a site plan agreement, as has been mentioned, which is going to be registered on title. And to further demonstrate the applicant's willingness to comply here, the site plan application has already been submitted by the applicant. So to summarize, the overarching intent of the application is to enable an existing local business to continue its operations, while at the same time ensuring that the use will remain small scale and compatible with surrounding uses and compatible with the township's rural landscape. The proposal conforms to all applicable planning policy documents and represents good planning. I'd be happy to answer any questions about the application, and the applicant is, as you already know, is attending in person today and is also available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lashbrook, any additional comments?
I have ran the business out of there for quite a few years now, as it was said, and I'm just trying to make a living. I don't want to, that's about all I have to say.
Fair enough.
Thank you.
Are there any members of the public who wish to make a comment? I'm staring at 3 of them. Okay, thank you. Is there anybody online left? No. All right, so I'm turning it over to council at this point, and Councillor Bochek, please. You've been leading off most of our discussions this week.
This happens every once in a while.
Yeah.
I want to commend you, first of all, for taking the steps to make this legal. And I've lived in this township more than half of my life, and we all know, whether it's Tower Road or Honey Harbor Road, there is a ton of home businesses that are being run out of residential zoned areas. So kudos to you for stepping up, and we're going through the process, talking with our planning department, seeing what you're going to need to comply. A lot of money being spent, I'm sure, but we don't have enough of these small landscaping businesses within the township to keep up with the growth of the township. And as we age in population, we don't want to be raking and shoveling and all that kind of stuff. So again, I really appreciate this, and I sure hope everything goes well for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis, please.
Yes, thank you. And to the planners on this, I'm curious, in the report, the property is an L-shaped property. And then there are it looks like 2 residential lots immediately to the sort of the northeast. Have we heard, or has word gone out to them about this application? I just curious if there's been any feedback.
Through you, your worship, they were circulated, of course, during the circulation process. And as of this morning's meeting, I have not heard a word from them.
Okay, and then my only concern, I think I agree with Councillor Bochek, great way to see some good commercial business in the area that's, in my mind, relatively low impact. But your intents are very clear, which is great. I'm just wondering about future use for the property once it's been established as being commercial in this nature, with certain areas of it to be sheds, yada, 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 for a landscaping business. If somebody else comes along down the road, what checks and balances do we have in place for somebody who wants to clearly expand the business and make it significantly bigger, take up more of the property, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Landscaping is one of those businesses, I think it's just been suggested that maybe people will be more and more leaning on in the area. It's good for business, good for you. I don't see it as a problem for us, generally speaking, but I'm wondering about what's in place for the future on this property.
Ms. McCabe, can you answer any of those et ceteras?
I'll try before the et ceteras. Through you, your worship. In regards to basically any future expansion of this, of course, they would have to come back for another zoning bylaw amendment. They would also have to amend their site plan agreement and go through site plan approval again. So the exact same process again in order to do any sort of expansion.
Thank you. That's clear. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Councillor Graziano, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. A couple of things that I want to articulate. First and foremost, I also echo Councillor Bochek's comments. I know of a yard currently in Port Severn whereby there is construction material left abutting a immediate neighbor whose side bedroom window overlooks it. And we've allowed for that. I can't imagine that this facility is going to impact anybody, at least from the aerial view. I don't see anyone around this yard for quite a large distance. And so unlike the Port Severn example, I can't imagine that this is going to be any concern. With that said, I also wish to articulate that we should be finding ways to support local businesses and grow our commercial infrastructure within our municipality rather than scrutinizing them. Now, of course, I understand we have our rules and we have to make sure that those rules are enforced. But I envision us supporting our businesses by way of trying to find a way where the applicant, and with the utmost respect to his planner, Mr. Soja, doesn't require Mr. Soja's help. I can imagine that he likely incurred a costly amount to bring this application forward, only to do what he is hoping to do, which is to create a viable business. And to be able to use the land that he's acquired to be able to park his vehicles and operate out of. So as a summary, I absolutely support this. I do hope that should this pass, we figure out a way to ensure that his yards are kept clean and that debris is not essentially lined up along the roadway and having our bylaws have to come out and pay a visit numerous times, our bylaw officers rather, having to come out and pay a visit numerous times, but I can't imagine that that he will. So with that said, I support this wholeheartedly, and I do hope that that council supports it as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pedko.
Thank you, and through you, Your Worship. Yeah, I also, I just a couple of questions about the property, but in general, Lake Joseph Road has a combination of commercial and residential. It seems to coexist fairly well along the road. So when we see this come forward as an application, I'm hoping it seems as clear cut then as it does today. My questions about the property, Ms. McCabe, if you don't mind just clarifying, the zone that would be rezoned as rural with the special purposes, it's an irregular shape. Is there a benefit to having an irregular shape or just allowing the front that front square of the property to be in that zone.
Through you, your worship, the applicant's agent, Mr. Soja, and I will discuss this a little further. However, after discussing it with Derek, Director of Planning, we thought it best to sort of basically mirror what the official plan designation was, being rural. So we were thinking that the commercial portion that's going to be undertaken and recognized in the zoning amendment would be a rural exception, with the remainder remaining as residential. However, of course, we will discuss this further before a recommendation is brought forward and find the best solution on how to accommodate what Mr. Lashbrook's trying to do.
Okay, in terms of the shape of that being a regular oval.
Correct.
Compared to, okay. And then just for clarification, this property has two driveways, one that accesses Lake Joseph Road and one that accesses Clarke Road.
I will let the applicant respond to that.
It's a private road that does enter the property on the northeast side, but it's not well traveled. It's only used by the cottagers on the two back lakes, Toronto Lake and Haggard Lake. There's three people that use it. I don't use it personally.
But that's your address, the property address.
Yes, sir. It's because of the shape, I suppose. Yeah. It comes off Clerks Road in two positions.
Okay. And then just finally, if there was residential development at the back, there's no concerns about driveway going through the sort of more commercial part of the zone. It's just one property. They can access it however they like.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. That's all. Thanks.
Councillor Hazelton. Sorry? Jarvis has already spoken.
Still waving his hand.
Well, he's going to have to be patient because he...
Okay, I have a question for the applicant. How long has this business been in operation?
Since 2001.
Okay. So to our planning department, what are the policies of 2001? Would they have allowed this kind of thing? No.
Through you, your worship, no, it was still a residential zoning in the original 1991 bylaw. So no, it would have been in the same situation.
Okay. I'm tending to agree with Councillor Graziano and Bocek that we need to find a way to encourage this, support it, and it's unfortunate that you've had to incur a bunch of expense just to keep on doing what you've been doing for 20 years, but that's the current state. Thank you.
Okay, good. I have one inquiry before we start the second round. And so was this originally complaint driven?
It was a very interesting scenario how it actually came about. The bylaw enforcement officer came to me, of course, inquiring what the zoning was on the property, and it was a complaint. However, it was not a complaint about the business itself. It was a complaint about something on the property that was noticed by this particular person. But unfortunately, when bylaw went to the site, it was determined that there was a business was being run on the property.
Okay, was that smelly manure you stored one day? I'm sorry, that was just wild speculation. Out of line, so I'm going to do round two, and I'm going to start with Councillor Jarvis for round two.
Thank you. Since we've run into this on occasion in the past, there is a is there road allowance that takes up part of this property, Clerks Road, going down to Toronto Lake? Is that just an allowance, or is that an existing road, and who owns it, I guess?
Through you, your worship, it's my understanding that it's just a road allowance, but I haven't been able to determine who owns it as of yet. That will be something I will be definitely look into before I bring forth a recommendation.
I know I don't, so you can rule me out on that.
Okay.
Okay, but thank you.
Councillor Bocek, please.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Mayor, to our planning department, there was going to be an impact here to the owner of the property as far as taxes go. And I wonder if you can enlighten us a little bit, the difference between commercial taxation and residential taxation, and how it's going to affect the applicant.
Through your worship, I do not know anything about taxation.
Okay, I figured as much.
Therefore, I believe someone else should be answering that question.
Director Radigan, do you have any inclination to do so?
Thank you, Mayor Kazir, through you to Councillor Bocek. I wouldn't want to speculate without knowing any further details of the property, so I unfortunately cannot provide any further information.
I mean, I don't know how the mill rates compare commercial versus residential. I don't think they're that different. Anyway, all right, I'm not seeing any more hands. So I have moved by Councillor Jarvis, seconded by Councillor Bocek. Be it resolved that Council for the Township of Georgian Bay, 1, accepts all information presented at the public meeting on November 5th, 2024 regarding Township Zoning Bylaw Amendment Z24-16 regarding the rezoning of a portion of the property known as 4 Clerks Road. And 2, refers all information to Township staff for further discussion and review with all participants and correspondence at the public meeting. And 3, Township staff shall not schedule the next meeting of Council to consider the application until participants and correspondents at the public meeting have ample time to provide written comments and concerns if applicable. All those in favor? And that is carried. And this concludes the Planning Act public meeting portion of the agenda. All comments, questions, and concerns raised at the public meeting have been recorded and will be taken into consideration by staff prior to a recommendation being brought forward. I'm closing the public meeting portion of this meeting at 11:25. And moved by Councillor Cooper, seconded by Councillor Graziano. Be it resolved that Planning Council adopt Bylaw 2024-099 to confirm the proceedings of the November 5th, 2024 Council meeting. All those in favor? Lots of hands. Moved by Councillor Hazelton, second by Councillor Jarvis. Be it resolved that Planning Council does now adjourn at 11:26 a.m. until December 10th, 2024 at 9 a.m. or at the call of the chair. All those in favor? And we are adjourned. Thank you very much. Next meeting is at 1 o'clock and it's called the Committee of the Whole.
Last night, 3 times.
Brian, you beat me home.
Yeah, Mr. Jarvis was nice enough to take me the whole 90 seconds to get here.
Your sound is off.
It says it's on.
We can hear you, Brian.
Oh, the rest of them can hear me, Peter.
I'll whip over and turn it on for you. Oh dear, I'm teasing.
Can you not hear me, Peter?
No, he can't hear us. But his speakers are muted.
It's me. Hang on.
Oh, okay.
There we go.
There you go. Can you hear me now, Peter?
Yeah. Try again.
Yeah, I was saying Mr. Jarvis was kind
I
enough
guess
to.
My computer sound wasn't on. There we go.
Okay. Yeah, it was only 90 seconds for me to get home.
Mine's 90 minutes. Oh dear, not quite.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Township of Georgian Bay's Committee of the Whole meeting for Tuesday, November 5th, 2024. And I'd like to call this meeting to order at 1 o'clock. And I gave the land acknowledgement this morning, and so I'd like to, I'm going to pass on that this afternoon. And I'm going to ask council if there are any declarations of pecuniary interest or conflict of interest. And for those who are watching and doing the head count, there's 5 of us in council. Unfortunately, Councillor Predko is not able to join us this afternoon, and Councillor Jarvis hopes to join us in the next 15 minutes or thereabouts. And we have a deputation this afternoon, and that is from the Severn Sound Environmental Association with regards to drinking water source protection update. If you could. Yeah, pick a microphone, zip it on, and do the usual introduction to yourself and go into it.
Perfect. Thank you, Your Worship. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you to Your Worship, members of council and staff for allowing me to come and talk to you today. So I think I know most of you, but for those who don't know me, my name is Melissa Carruthers. I'm the manager of source water protection at the Severn Sound Environmental Association. I'm also a risk management official and inspector for 8 municipalities, including the Township of Georgian Bay.
You're also very soft-spoken, so you're going to make sure the mic's reasonably close to you.
Is that better?
That is. Thank you.
Also here with me today is Kirsten McLeod. She's the Severn Sound Environmental Association Source Water Protection Intern. Next slide, please. So today's presentation, it'll be a very brief overview of the Source Water Protection Program, an update from a risk management perspective, as well as a Source Protection Authority update. Next slide, please. So to start, super simple, source water is water from streams, lakes, rivers, underground aquifers used to supply public or private drinking water systems. Can come from one of 2 sources, either surface water or groundwater. However, when we're talking about the Drinking Water Source Protection Program, we are talking about protecting municipal-only sources from contamination and overuse. Next slide, please. Drinking Water Source Protection Program gets its power from the Ontario Clean Water Act, so it's the first step in Ontario's multi-barrier approach to protecting municipal drinking water systems. The other 4 barriers are dealt with through the distribution system and are dealt with through the Safe Drinking Water Act, so really not a part of today's presentation. Next slide, please. Although it's source water is provincial legislation, it's rolled out locally with local source protection plans. There's 19 regions within the province, and we are a part of the South Georgian Bay Lake Simcoe Source Protection Region. So this region, we're over 10,000 square kilometers in size, consists of 52 municipalities, and we have the greatest number of municipal drinking water systems across the province, approximately 1/3. Within the Township of Georgian Bay, 2 of those systems impact you. So those would be Port Severn, obviously right here, we're in Port Severn, as well as Rope Subdivision, which is a Township of Tay system. Within the South Georgian Bay Lake Simcoe Source Protection Region, there are also source protection areas and authorities. We operate on a watershed basis. In our region, those consist of the Lake Simcoe region and Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority, as well as the Severn Sound Environmental Association. And we are one of 2 non-conservation authorities to act in that capacity. Next slide, please. So there's 2 key vulnerable areas that have been defined as part of the source protection program. So those are wellhead protection areas for groundwater systems, also known as WAPAs, or intake protection zones, or IPZ, for surface water systems. IPZs, they are calculated, so an IPZ1 it's a 1 kilometer radius around the intake, except when it hits land, which is 120 meter setback. And then there's an IPZ2, which is the amount of time it would take to shut down a system if a known contaminant was to enter the water. So in our region, that time of travel is 2 hours. So to reiterate, so the program is provincial legislation. It's rolled out locally and only applies within vulnerable areas. So as you can see from the map on your screen, Township of Georgian Bay, most of it is not impacted by this regulation. Next slide, please. So to take it even further, so there's only 22 drinking water threats that apply under the Clean Water Act. So it's not a broad brush, not absolutely everything applies. 20 of those threats are water quality and 2 are water quantity. This threats span multiple sectors, as you can see as an overview on the slide, so agricultural, municipal, industrial, some residential, so nobody's really exempt. So we're not pinpointing, one particular industry over another. Next slide, please. So you might be asking, so how do we actually protect the water through this program? So on the screen, you'll see our local source protection plan. We implement these policies, and a source protection plan, it's a document that contains a range of policies. In general, the goal is to manage existing significant drinking water threats and prohibit anything future. This, again, only applies within those local vulnerable areas. And also, as previously mentioned, each source protection region has their own local source protection plan. So alongside the source protection plan, the science behind the program is laid out in what's called the assessment reports. There's an assessment report for every watershed within our region, so that makes 4 of them within our region. And these lay out the science, so it details each municipal system, how they were mapped, what threats apply, and so much more. So it really is the science, and they're all a couple inches thick, so it's a little light reading if you'd like. Next slide, please. So that just scratches the surface of what the program is, but I think probably what you need for today, just to kind of get your feet wet. Switching to risk management services and what that means to you. So I act as a risk management official for the Township of Georgian Bay as per Township Bylaw 2018-81. So this was adopted by Council in August of 2018. This work is currently funded through the District Municipality of Muskoka, as they are the owners of the Port Severn system. Township of Georgian Bay also needs a risk management official. As we are a committee of a whole here today. So you obviously have planning and building applications that come across that could impact the municipal system and or are happening within the intake protection zone. And as you can see on the slide, some of the things I do in my role as a risk management official are implementing prohibitions, negotiating risk management plans. So a risk management plan is a legal document between myself and the person engaged in the activity, which is most likely local landowners, businesses, some homeowners. And these are plans that lay out mitigative measures to make sure whatever their actions are don't impact the system. Significant amount of time was done in the past between myself and the previous risk management official to determine if any significant threats were on the landscape here within the township. As I just mentioned, so to ensure no new threats end up on the landscape, part of my job is reviewing any new development applications. So it's reviewing for alignment with the Clean Water Act, as well as the local source protection plan. If there is an impact, so I issue either comments or notices, and that becomes part of a complete application. So obviously I'm working very closely with your planning department. There is an annual reporting deadline of February 1st. So I kind of wear 2 hats for this one, but I do input as your risk management official as part of that annual reporting process, and obviously answering inquiries from members of the public and municipal staff. So I did want to note that you currently don't have any risk management plans within the Township of Georgian Bay. However, there are changes coming to the threats and circumstances that make these things threats, which may result in additional threats being on the landscape in the future. Most likely those would be around handling and storage of fuel and or the application of salt. So the province sort of sets the game plan, the rule book. They've made some changes to those, which is going to reduce some thresholds. So we're not done, sort of thing. It's an ongoing program. Next slide, please. So switching again sort of to as a source protection authority. So Severn Sound Environmental Association, we are designated as a source protection authority under Ontario Regulation 28407, and we act in this capacity as per various regulations under the Ontario Clean Water Act, as well as Ontario Regulation 20518 under the Safe Drinking Water Act. So currently this work is funded through the province. This work is more the high-level policy work. So the risk management official is your boots on the ground implementing the policy. The source protection authority is that higher level, creating the policies, making sure the mapping is correct, the science behind the program is up to date. We're involved with educating members of the public, making sure they're aware of what's happening, as well as supporting municipalities to make sure they understand what their roles are, as well as giving them the tools they need to do their job. Flipping over again, so I do meet annually with members of your staff to complete the annual reporting requirements. Some of these questions, I don't know them as a risk management official. They are a municipal thing. So I assist to make sure that that's done on time as well. And then due to a change in 2018 to the Safe Drinking Water Act, a huge role as a source protection authority is we're responsible for leading the process when changes to municipal systems occur. Next slide, please. So a very quick, very brief overview for you. But in summary, Drinking Water Source Protection Program, it's provincial legislation. It's rolled out locally, only applies within vulnerable areas, only to the 22 drinking water threats. Severn Sound Environmental Association, we act as a source protection authority as per various regulations and as the township's risk management official as per township bylaw and agreements. And with that, I'll open it to questions.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And you're getting through it quite quickly. Councillor Bocek, please.
I think you can hear me now. Thank you very much for the presentation. And as the past representative from the township of Georgian Bay, it's nice to bring this information to our council. I know it's only one small faction of what SSEA does, but it's nice that you've been able to come here and explain the source water protection. I do have one question though, and it may be an error on my part. You said there was one source water intake for the rope survey and for Port Severn. Do we not have a water system in Mactier and sewer system in Mactier? Because I think from the district of Muskoka, we did a tour of the facility. So I'm just wondering why there is no mention of the Mactier area.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, or your worship, to Councillor Bocek. Yes, it's my understanding that there is some protections put in place for the Mactier. However, it's not currently a part of the approved source protection plan. I'd have to check the mapping, but I think it might be a little bit outside of the watershed of where it applies.
You could be correct, because I believe the intake is from Stuart Lake, which is perhaps not in our township. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hazelton.
Thank you, and thanks for the presentation. I do have some questions, but first, Mayor, I do have a question related to our planning department, given that has been referenced a few times, and perhaps there is somebody from the planning department that could attend to answer questions related to this. But going on further, the understanding that I have and that you have reinforced is that the municipal water supply is a district responsibility. Is that correct?
Thank you, through your worship. It's kind of a two-edged answer to that. So the district, they're the owners of the system, so they currently pay for the risk management services. However, both the district and the township both need to have a risk management official. As you mentioned, so from the planning perspective, the district as well as the township, you have different jurisdictions, so different applications will flow through either one of those municipalities. So you both need it, but the district pays because they're the owners of the system.
Okay, so could you, while we are hopefully waiting for somebody from planning, could you give us some insight into the amount of time spent with our planning department and what are the types of discussions?
Thank you, through your worship. So I can give you so as of today in 2024, we've commented on 13 different applications. They range in time frame, so I won't be able to speak on actual hours spent at this point. But yes, it really does depend on what's coming across the planning department's desks and where they fall as well. So that number does fluctuate as well.
So you have outlined in your slide the key vulnerable areas. Are those the areas that you would express concern and want and feel that there's a need for discussion?
Thank you, through your worship. That's correct, Councillor Hazelton. It only applies within those intake protection zones. So for the township of Georgian Bay, it's within the Port Severn intake protection zone, as well as there is a small portion of the Rope subdivision from Tay that does impact the township of Georgian Bay.
So we're talking about, I think you've already said this, a very tiny element of our township.
That's correct.
Okay. And is there any reason, given that the district is really responsible and pays for all of this, is there any reason that we shouldn't be liaising through the district on these matters. And if they need to talk to you, they can. I'm just wondering why we're in this game at all, given that they are the ones responsible for the source, and they are responsible for mitigating any risks.
Thank you, through your worship, to Councillor Hazelton. So yes, so the district does pay. However, as per Part 4 of the Clean Water Act, the Township of Georgian Bay is also legally required to have a risk management official.
Okay. That sounds like a burden where we don't have any responsibilities for the water. What could you? If my memory serves me correctly, I think the total funds for this service are about 10 grand.
Thank you, through your worship. So it estimated for 2025, I believe it's just over 8,000, and last year, or wait, I have the numbers in front of me. Yes, 2025, we're estimating about 82,000, and in 2024, it was closer to 9.
When you say 82,000, do you mean 8,200 or 82,000?
Yes, 8,200, yes.
Okay. So it's 8,200 going to 9. The district covers it. You comment on a few applications. Sounds to me like it's a pretty small overall component. Is that a fair framing of it?
Thank you, through your worship, to Councillor Hazelton. Further within the Township of Georgian Bay, yes, there is a small portion. So it really, that number and the workload would change based on if there was more systems. But as I mentioned, so for right now, it's not significant, but there is changes coming that may make it more significant.
Can you highlight what you're referring to?
Through your worship. So those are, as I mentioned, so everything within this drinking water source protection program, there's what's called the Director's Technical Rules that's set out by the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks. Those outline the 22 drinking water threats, all the circumstances around those, and they are changing the thresholds for some of the threats. Most likely the ones that would impact Township of Georgian Bay are the handling, storage of fuel, and the application of salt. So salt is significantly being reduced, as well as fuel. So there's potential that those could apply within the township in the next couple of years.
Okay, and as I look at your diagram, there doesn't look like there's any footprint in your red circle, so to speak, of risk areas that would even come close to township administrative properties. Is that your understanding as well?
Thank you, through your worship, to Councillor Hazelton. The township office itself, no, is not within the intake protection zone, but a lot of the businesses just down the street from here are.
So in a situation where you have businesses that are potentially in the risk area, aren't they liable? And why would the township carry liability or have liability when it's businesses in that geography?
Thank you, through your worship, to Councillor Hazelton. So yes, so the district is paying because they have the liability and they are the owners of the system. It's up to me as the risk management official to be negotiating with those local landowners to making sure that they are meeting their requirements and having either prohibitions or risk management plans in place. So
okay, I've asked a ton of questions. I'll let others ask. Thank you.
And I'm just going to add, it's per provincial regulations. It's not like we have a choice in this matter.
Well, in fairness, I'm not arguing the provincial regulation. What I'm trying to establish here is what is the scope of our role in this risk management world. And what I'm getting out of the responses that I've gotten is that our role in this is tiny, minuscule, especially compared to the township. And maybe we do have some, provincially legislated requirement to do something, but certainly it doesn't appear to be very significant based on the answers that I've been getting. But thank you very much for that.
Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, I just wanted to make sure we're not having a sound problem. And thank you for the presentation. I just had a couple of quick things. In terms of the two source areas, just so I can understand exactly where they are. There's one that's over near the Rope subdivision, which is basically, I would think, in the jurisdiction of Tay. Is it Tay Township?
Through your worship to Councillor Cooper, that's correct. It is a township of Tay system, but the way the intake protection zone falls with the mapping, yes, it does impact some properties within the township of Georgian Bay.
Right, but it's actually physically, the intake is not in our township.
That's correct.
What about the one in Port Severn? Where is that?
So through your worship to Councillor Cooper, yes, that one is within the township of Georgian Bay. Again, that's the properties we were just speaking to that are impacted by that intake protection zone.
Okay, so we have one where it's actually physically within our township, and but I guess adjacent township Severn would also, just like the other one at Rope, they would have some impact as well.
That's correct. Through you, your worship to Councillor Cooper, that's 100% correct, and there is some risk management plans on the Severn side within the Port Severn intake protection zone.
So we're sharing with them. Isn't that nice of us? Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to know, can you tell me when the SSEA or your part of SSEA actually became an agency for this?
Thank you. Through your worship to Councillor Cooper. So Clean Water Act was passed in 2006, and we were named in the regulations then.
2006, okay. And since then, we've had circumstances where we discovered, for example, there was a situation in the Severn area where there was a septic system that was approved and then not approved. And it was actually in this particular area. In other words, in this jurisdiction, so to speak. And so this was would have been in about I don't know, 2014, maybe something like that. But SSEA was already in the game, so to speak, at that point. But the reality is that SSEA didn't draw any attention to that at all at the time, which was is concerning to me. Can you tell me why? This is an application that came forward for Sawdust Island, which is off Severn's Port Severn.
Thank you. Through your worship to Councillor Cooper. I'm not familiar with this application. What I can speak to is with septic systems, they are a threat under the Clean Water Act, but the implementing bodies are depending on the size. So if they're greater than 10,000 liters per day, that would be a Ministry of Environment, currently called Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks approvals. Under that, it would fall to the township.
So, but SSEA wouldn't be aware of any of this or made aware of any of this because they weren't involved at all. And should SSEA or your aspect of SSEA not be brought into an application like this?
I'm going to turn it over to our CBO.
Through your worship to Councillor Cooper. Councillor Cooper, I believe the island you're talking about in question is on holding tanks.
It is now, yes, it is. But they were trying
to it has been, right?
But the time that the application came forward, they were trying to get a septic system put in, not holding tanks.
Right. So my understanding is a lot of the times there are IPZ layers on our mapping. And if it's something that comes up during the planning review, it will be caught then if there's an issue that SSEA should be commenting on.
Well, hopefully our mapping is going to be better than it has been. And I was very interested to hear that basically the District of Muskoka is covering off your particular costs to run your operation, not the township. That I found quite interesting, and thank you for that. Makes me feel better. That's it. Thank you.
Sorry, can I add to that? To Councillor Cooper, I just wanted to add, following on what was just spoken about, so there is, it's called, to get technical, it's called the Section 59 process. So any applications that come through the municipality, if they're within that intake protection zone, there is a process set up of how those applications flow between the Severn Sound Environmental Association and the township to make sure that things aren't falling through the cracks. So hopefully that wasn't the case. I will note we are in the process of finishing up some new training to go to the planning departments because things are changing, staff are changing, so that's hopefully going to be out by the end of the year to reiterate that process as well.
Thank you. I'm going to go back to Councillor Bochek.
Yeah, just a little context to what was just said, because I want to make sure that the truth is revealed here, that this sawdust island had a toilet that was a composting toilet. And our staff went out and demanded a septic bed be put in. It didn't meet the setbacks required, so it ended up being holding tanks. And it's very unfortunate for the person who owned the property. And I agree with Councillor Cooper that all septic beds that are within the source protection area is the responsibility of our planning department to report to you. And I agree with that 100%. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hazelton.
The opportunity to speak again. Thank you. So I do have another question. And I've zoomed in on your map here that has the red circles, and I can't be certain whether the item that I'm concerned about is in your circle or not, but I wanted to highlight that we have some floating homes very close to that red circle, if not inside that red circle. And I'm being told that they aren't having sewage trucks come out and pump their floating home out. So that means they must be discharging sewage into the waters there. And I'm wondering what, I wonder who cares about that. It seems that a source protection group would be very focused and care about that. Can you comment on that?
Sure. Thank you through your worship to Councillor Hazelton. So yes, kind of this is also a multi-layer answer, I guess, to this question. When we were first made aware of the floating accommodations, there was multiple conversations between Township of Georgian Bay staff and myself to determine if the regulation would apply or not. I don't know if it's a question of who cares, because we really do care, but we all have jurisdiction and the rules that we can play by. When it comes to the sewage, again, it depends on who's responsible for that. So as you mentioned, so if it's discharging into the water versus are they coming to dock and then discharging somewhere else, different players are impacted. Currently for source water protection, I can't regulate a vessel, so I can't regulate something. It's just like I can't regulate a transport truck going down the 400. Sort of something in motion isn't currently within the scope of the program. I will say though, based on conversations within this municipality and others, it is on the radar of others within the source water world of how do we even handle this. So currently today, no, it doesn't apply, but it doesn't mean it won't in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think you raise what is a very important point, is that we can do all that we can to protect the source water based on township, I'll say not assets, but property in the township. But when the feds refuse to step up and take responsibility for vessels, it makes it challenging to make that protection complete.
That's correct, yes.
All right, I'm not seeing any more hands. So I'm going to say thank you very much for your presentation. It's greatly appreciated that came in to provide it. And we look forward to an update again next year.
Perfect. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Okay. And there's no motion in regarding this particular item. So next on our list is a couple of new business items, and the first one would be terms of reference. And Councillor Graziano, I'll turn that over.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you, pretty self-explanatory. It's an opportunity to open up a discussion with regards to creating terms of reference for what was recently passed, specifically with regards to the hiring of a solid waste management consultant who will endeavor to go to market and price out solid waste accordingly. Wanted to have an opportunity to allow COW to discuss ideally what we'd like to see and perhaps bring forward a resolution and providing staff with direction on the terms of reference and or developing specific terms of reference for this particular initiative. So with that said, over to Council to open up a discussion and see what comes out of it.
Councillor Cooper, please.
I just wanted to weigh in to say I think that terms of reference are important with a lot of different things, and they should be developed. So I would encourage that. Thank you.
Councillor Hazelton.
Why, thank you again. So terms of reference is a phrase that I have used many times last term and this term. It is, in my opinion, the critical step to getting what you want. And sadly, there seems to have been circumstances where it seems that we believe that experts know what their job is, and they go and do their job. And I'm going to kind of tag another line in here. It's not just terms of reference, but it's terms of reference with active coaching. And when we bring in somebody to do a job, if first of all we don't have terms of reference, it's, in my opinion, it's going to be a fail. But if we don't actively coach the person as well, then the so-called expert, then it's also likely going to be a fail. One of the comments that I've heard recently, and this is not a negative on planning, this is just planning related. And the question really is, how could you expect somebody who is an expert in planning to come into our township and make good planning decisions if they don't get out and see our township and they don't understand the history? And this morning we heard accolades from Councillor Bochek to Councillor Cooper for highlighting the history of a planning matter, which provided great illumination to the matter at hand. And I think that what we see is the background is so critical. We'll call the background and that kind of information active coaching. So it's a combination of effective terms of reference, guiding the consultant to clearly understand what it is you're trying to achieve, and then ongoing coaching, providing relevant information that the consultant would only perhaps stumble across in order to be able to get to a position of being able to bring real value to our township. So I absolutely endorse and support this. Thank you.
Councillor Bochek.
Yes, I'll be brief. I don't disagree with Councillor Hazelton that this is going to be very necessary. And I don't know that coaching from individual councillors along the way would achieve much, but if we could put this through the committee process and have a gathering of thoughts that could be given to the expert with some sort of target to follow the guidelines, I think would be good. I don't know what committee that would fall under or you know, what auspice it would be, but I think a committee making recommendations or suggestions to a consultant would probably carry more weight and be a broader spectrum of what our township is.
But I don't disagree with Mr. Hazelton on that point. And I think this is necessary.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with the motion. I'm wondering, obviously there's some haste required in that our waste bins are going to be removed by the end of next year. So we've got to do things fairly quickly. I'd rather do them in an organized fashion than try and do it on a panic way. But how are we going to get things moving along here so that our terms of reference, which I agree with, get put down on paper soon, so that anybody we bring in as a consultant is can hit the ground running, and it's got to be done fairly quickly, unless I'm mistaken.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper.
And thank you, Mayor, for giving me a second go at this. I appreciate it. I just wanted to say a couple of things. One is I wanted to thank our CAO to agree to work with me on creating a one-page document. Maybe it needs to be a two-page document, but nevertheless, a document that describes our township. There's been a lot of times when we've engaged experts and not had anything to give them to say, this is what we're talking about. It's, you know, a variety of a biosphere, blah, blah, you know, this number of thousands of kilometers of shoreline. I could go on, and it's all in a document like this that can be handed to a consultant to, at least, the very least, in a written form, will have something to work with. So we started on that document. It's I think it's a work in progress, but that's something our committee of the whole could participate in, I think, if anyone was interested in being involved. I'll also, I just want to give you an example of why this is so important and why things can go off the rails. We had some years ago, a ward boundary expert brought in to create an examination of our ward system. And we ended up paying this consultant somewhere around $35,000 or $40,000 to do a ward boundary review. And basically, the wards didn't change. They were essentially, there was no consultation with the community. It was basically listening to what the mayor at the time and a couple of others said. And we ended up with 3 wards east-west, more or less, or 2 wards. I can't remember, it was 2 or 3, and paid a massive bill. And we had to bring in a real expert, Dr. Williams, and he cleaned it up, I think, for $5,000 or $6,000. Unbelievable. And now we have a 4-ward system, north, south, east, west. It's more representative of the communities out there. The reason being is that Dr. Williams talked to people. He actually talked to some of our community members and said, well, where's your community? And he did a lot of research and got data from the district, for example, from Watson and Associates, who are economists. And so I tell this story because there's an example of somebody can go off and be lost, so to speak, by not consulting and not having data. And even if this individual had been handed our history sheet and our descriptor sheet, I'm not sure that he would have read it, but that's another matter. I just think it's important to understand that we need to be able to tell our consultants who and what we are. Thank you.
Thank you. My comment on this is, this is recommending that we, the committee of the whole in the future, create terms of reference. I think we have to be careful in that I believe the terms of reference will be a moving target. And what I mean by that is, as we gain more information, we're right now hoping to get in the near future a legal opinion with regards to marina bins. We've approached the MECP to get them to reconsider their differentiation between cottagers and yachters. We've passed a motion asking district to give us some costing on a potential waste depot on that serves Go Home Lake. As the next few months unfold, different information is going to come in, and so I want to be careful. We don't, let me call it, deceive ourselves that we can sit down 1 week or 1 month and come up with terms of reference and say, here, go to a consultant, without realizing that, you know, it could be just weeks later that we get a new piece of information we didn't have before. And so I think we have to understand and appreciate that however we use this consultant at some point in the future, we have to understand that it's an evolving assignment. And I don't want us to narrow things down too much by creating a term of reference and then leaving it at that. Councillor Wojcik.
Thank you, and through your Mayor. My question is to our CAO. I haven't dove into the 2.5-inch thick budget yet, but is any of this a budget concern? We're talking about consulting fees and writing of terms of reference and that type of thing. Do you have any concerns about what you need to finance this or put this in order?
Director Radigan.
Thank you, Mayor Kutsier. Through you to Councillor Wojcik. We do have it already included within the budget as a council directed item to be funded out of reserves. I believe that was the original direction received from council. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Councillor Graziano.
Thank you. You know, based on comments made by your worship, you know, I feel that it is necessary to have parallel efforts. We need to be able to obtain different data points in order to make a decision based on perfect information, or as perfect information as it can possibly be. And there are a lot of different dimensions to this issue that we're confronted with. As we know, there's the district side, there's the province side, there's you know, commercial independent contractors, and what can all of these different actors offer us by way of garbage collection, and perhaps you know, we inevitably decide on some type of hybrid model. Perhaps we allocate all of our collection services to one vendor. But the parallel efforts are required. So all of the conversations happening with the MECP, all the conversations and the requests that we have sent to the district are simply us attempting to try to better understand the circumstances and what we can and can't do, as well as what those costs may be. My understanding with respect to the mandate pertaining to the consultant was that they would endeavor to go to market and engage third-party vendors to see what those third-party vendors could do and how much it would cost based on our needs. And this is where I think we need to narrow our focus and have it very tightly focused on the specific requirements that we want from this particular consultant. So rather than giving them broad direction and then letting them report back on information that's not necessarily going to be applicable to our municipality, we send them forward with a very focused understanding that we want to understand what curbside collection is going to cost. We want to understand what bins are going to cost at marinas. Can bins be, can they happen, and how do we achieve these goals? What's a depot going to cost if in the event that it's a privatized depot, so on and so on. So I think by designing terms of reference and allowing them to then essentially go to market and find out that information on our behalf is really going to be key to our success once we compile all of these different data points into one final decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor. And I sort of look at this maybe a little bit differently in that I think what I feel is that terms of reference need to be applied to any challenge that we're trying to deal with. And what I mean by that is we might have terms of reference for this particular project, but we have projects all the time where we occasionally have to bring in a consultant. So we would tailor the terms of reference to the specific situation so that we can't, use a broad brush and say, here are the terms of reference that we use all the time. We can have a descriptor of the township. Sure. We can, and I would look at this more like a job description almost. In other words, here's the job description, and let's get on with it. And if we have to tweak it as we go along, that often happens. Even with the job description, it gets tweaked. So I think that's the answer from my perspective. I don't think it's just about the solid waste issue. I think it's about using terms of reference when we're going out to hire consultants. That's my two cents. Thank you.
Oops, sorry about that. I had the mic was on, I turned it off. I said that's a very broad perspective, but I think in this particular case, we're specifically talking about terms of reference for hiring a solid waste consultant. And in my mind, there is going to be ongoing discussion between us and staff. I mean, at this stage, to the best of my knowledge, no. Staff have not gone out to find a consultant or done anything on it. But if I read this motion correctly, what it's basically saying is that in our next committee of the whole, there'll be an item on the agenda talking about terms of reference for our solid waste consultant. And to me, I have no issue with that simply because I think next month we should be talking solid waste regardless. Because at that point, maybe we'll have a little more information to work with and we can narrow down that, call it scope, call it terms of reference of what we may want from a consultant. So I'm going to read the motion. Moved by Councillor Graziano, second by Councillor Cooper. Whereas Council adopt Resolution C 2024-337 during the special council meeting of October 18, 2024 to hire a solid waste consultant to assess and price the Township of Georgian Bay's needs. And whereas the next step is to define the terms of reference for this engagement to ensure clarity and precision in the consultant's mandate. Now therefore be it resolved that the Committee of the Whole recommend Council discuss and create the terms of reference for hiring a solid waste consultant during the next Committee of the Whole meeting, and that staff be directed to bring forward a draft of the terms of reference for Council's review and approval prior to issuing the request for proposals. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That has passed. All right. And what I believe is our last item of this round of Council of yesterday and today, Councillor Graziano, exemption to Bylaw 1991-105.
Thank you. And
Councillor Bochek, you put your hand up?
Yes, I did. I'm going to declare a conflict of interest here for the cow discussion, but may re-enter if this moves forward to council. So I don't know how to dismiss myself from this conversation due to a conflict.
May I suggest, and the clerk might correct me, keep your mouth shut during the discussion.
Perfect.
But you should be happy. You can listen or not.
Yeah, so I would turn your camera off if you're not participating.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
All right, and I hope
Mayor, I have a barge arriving. I have to step out and guide him in. I'll be back in a few minutes.
Okay. 1, 2. Well, we still have quorum because there's 4 of us. All right, Councillor Graziano, you have a more limited audience, but go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Essentially, the motion brought forward today before Council is essentially to consider and discuss whether allowing an exemption that is approved by Council for Bylaw 1991-05 for those that require an exemption The impetus for this motion was created because there are people on our lakes that have and hold permits from federal government in order to call populations of geese and nuisance animals in order to, or in a way to control these animals and their prolific procreation. This is very much an issue on one of the inland lakes, specifically on the pool. There is a marina owner that currently feeds geese and allows them to to have safe harbor there, and of course water quality is affected by the geese feces, and so there are going to be times where those that do hold these permits are going to be restricted by our bylaws, specifically in the proximity to abutting neighbors. In the example that I've provided, either neighbor on either side have approved and actually sent in letters confirming that they were fine with this person proceeding to remove some of the geese by way of calling them. And however, there was one complainant that was beyond the bylaw's jurisdiction who had contacted Bylaw, which created the visit by Bylaw and followed by a request not to discharge their firearm. So my thoughts here is essentially allow those that wish to seek and apply for an exemption to be able to do so, bring their concerns to council, and allow council the opportunity at our discretion or at the will of council to make a decision as to whether or not we will allow an exemption to the bylaw, similar to that of what we've had discussed in the previous month around the sand on 6 Mile Lake. I think it's fair because it gives an opportunity for our residents to be able to come before council and state their case, rather than just having a binary yes or no decision made by Bylaw and that being final. So it's not that we are giving the opportunity for them to do so, rather we are giving them an opportunity to plead their case before council and for council to make a final decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone from staff wish to respond before I turn over to council?
I think through you, Mayor Coetzee, let's see what council has to say, and then maybe we can provide some additional feedback.
Councillor Jarvis.
Yeah, I start by stating that I don't think there's any such thing as safe firearm discharge in an area where there are other cottagers around, and we should keep that in mind with any of our deliberations. The other aspect of this is what somebody might consider to be a nuisance animal, be it geese, cormorants, deer, wolves, coyote, neighbor's dog, I don't know. What somebody may consider a nuisance may not be considered a nuisance in another manner, and I think we got to be very, very careful not to trip over that as well. I'm not keen on this aspect to our firearms regulations at all. I'd rather keep them as they were. As things currently stand, to my knowledge, we've had no accidents as a result of firearms discharge, and I don't know how many years we've had this bylaw in effect, and I think that is proof in and of itself that the bylaw is doing the job it should be doing.
Thank you. Any other comments from any other councillor? I'm going to comment that this concerns me, and it concerns me for a couple of reasons. One is that, well, first of all, it says it does not provide exemption for responsible firearm owners. Well, I'm just wondering, are we distinguishing responsible firearm owners from irresponsible firearm owners? because I certainly hope we don't have too many of those, because obviously firearms can do significant harm if they're not properly managed. I'm really worried about this because this could open up the floodgates. And what I mean by that is that if we start saying that people can make applications for exemptions from particular bylaws, then all of a sudden council is going to become the arbitrator of who bylaws apply to and who they don't apply to. And I think that will, A, could potentially take a significant portion of our time, and B, make it more of a political decision than a, let me call it, principled decision. I'm also concerned that the bylaw was put in place because we don't want accidental harm done to, I'll call it, innocent bystanders and their property. We have incidences in the MacTier area where people are going on to Crown land and shooting away high-powered firearms and harming private property. And I'm willing to believe that that wasn't their intention, but it was a consequence of that behavior. Bullets can ricochet. Granite is hard. It bounces bullets. So to me, this law was created 23 years ago, and to protect neighbors from other neighbors' activity. And I think that we shouldn't make exemptions lightly, and it's going to put the onus on us as council to pretend we're bylaw officers and come up with our own interpretation of bylaws and how they should be enforced. And I really don't think that's appropriate for councillors to take that on, because I think I think then that many of our residents would feel vulnerable because they have no idea what neighbors might show up and ask for exemptions. And and are we going to say that within a certain radius we need signed signatures or affidavits? It could get very complicated, and I think that is a real concern that we have to consider as we go forward on the discussion on this. Councillor Cooper.
Well, I'd like to say that I appreciate hearing other people's viewpoints on this. It's been very helpful to me. I can only sort of relate to my own circumstances, and from time to time I have to go around and pick up goose feces on my property. Some of them are blue from blueberries. They're eating all the lovely blueberries on my property. It's very upsetting. But and the same, oh, by the way, cranberries too. They really have their nerve. But and we had a much smaller dish of cranberries at Thanksgiving. So, I'm not going to go out and shoot them, and I really feel uncomfortable with that, and for a variety of reasons, some of which have been stated here. I'm sorry, but I can't really support any exemptions to this. And I think well taken point that we've had this in place for a long time, and it seems to have worked for the most part. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Graziano.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. And it clearly shows that council's will has been discussed and brought forward. Right now, efforts to oil eggs are ongoing by associations in order to control the goose population. The irony is that the only vegan on council is the one that is bringing forward this motion here. And I understand that there are permits issued by our federal government in order to control these populations. And if the federal government didn't feel that there was a reason or a need to issue permits to allow for this, then I can't endeavor to imagine that they would. And so I'm not going to question our government and our federal government and their wisdom on why they do offer permits to residents in order to help control the population. But I do understand that this is an ongoing problem, especially one that plagues the inland lakes, including 6 Mile. with regards to the proof of bylaw, I think there's a lot of distortion here. The assumption that the bylaw is working rather than responsible gun owners being the ones that are behind the reason for no issues arising over how long of a period. I mean, I'm sure that we can go well beyond 1991 and confirm that, it's not in fact the bylaw. Now, maybe perhaps the bylaw is assisting, maybe it's not. We don't know, and we can't say that. We can say that as a gun owner myself, I understand what it takes to be responsible, and I understand what it takes to ensure that those that are surrounding me are safe from my use of a firearm. The example in MacTier would be a good case of irresponsible firearm usage, given that people are firing at different assets on Crown land. And that's not, in my eyes, responsible gun ownership. That's irresponsible, and that's a great case to make for irresponsible use. So with that said, clearly there's no will in council today to pass this motion, and I respect that. I brought it forward because I thought, if anything, council should have an opportunity to listen to our community members, have an opportunity to offer them an exemption if in the event that one was due. But what it sounds like to me is that our council would rather leave the decision to bylaw and a binary yes or no versus a any special consideration above and beyond. Thank you.
Councillor Jarvis.
Yeah, I just want to iterate, and we've talked about irresponsible versus responsible gun ownership, and that's rather tricky in many ways. But I think because we're dealing here with a lethal weapon, we have to sort of consider the lowest common denominator, and work with that in mind. Unfortunately, for those that are responsible, end up paying for the fact that we have to make sure that things are appropriately restricted because of those that are irresponsible. And I understand that if somebody has a license to go out and hunt, that's something that's been issued. It's all legal, and it doesn't bother me at all in any way, shape, or form. The controlling or culling of wildlife of any sort is a difficult one. I'll go over that again. Sometimes some people think that, as Councillor Cooper suggested, geese on their property is a problem and the geese aren't supposed to be there. But fact of the matter is, geese, cormorants, deer, moose, bear, whatever, we're all here before we were. We're encroaching on their land. They're not encroaching on ours. And I think we've got to set that aside and look at those with hunting licenses and those with that have been given the appropriate documentation to go out and take a moose or a bear or deer or whatever. And there's a ton of Crown land that they can do that on, and I think that's wholly appropriate. In our case, again, the other thing we got to consider is more people are building in our municipality. The buildings are closer together. Buildings are bigger, and a bigger building is a bigger target. I think we just got to be very, very careful in that regard, and hence my comments earlier. Thanks.
Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor, and I'll be very brief. I just another little sort of history lesson. This matter came up about, I don't know, 10, 12, 15 years ago. I remember watching this discussion at our township before I was a council member, and the proponent was quite upset about the geese leaving a real mess on his very large lawn. And so they wanted to pass a bylaw and a sign bylaw and put signs up on the lawn. The problem is that why this was defeated was that geese don't read. There you go. Thank you.
I don't want to go down that road, but I do want to make the comment that our bylaw is not in any way going against the federal regulations or any provincial regulations or whatever ministries. And the ministries are at either level of government. They have their authorities. All our bylaw is saying is the firearm has to be discharged a certain distance from a residence. And so I think that we have to, we're not trying to say that you can or can't shoot. We're trying to say that if you're shooting, you got to be a certain distance away from residents. And I think that's a reasonable restriction. I mean, I know there are hunters behind me at times during the year, but I'm glad that they have to keep a certain distance. And I think that's best for everyone. And so I don't want us to think that we're trying to say no to the federal governments or the provincial government ministries, but rather just do what you want to do or do what you have to do a certain distance away from other people's homes. Councillor Graziano.
Thank you, Worship. And respectfully, I'm going to beg to differ. Our bylaw caused the constituent that I have been having a conversation with to lose his federal license because without his ability to call based on the federal government's guidelines, there was really no purpose to have the license. And so they rescinded his license. Because our bylaw precluded him from being able to discharge his firearm, where both of his two neighbors flanking him that would be otherwise of concern based on our bylaw were perfectly open to having him discharge his firearm. And you know, I wonder how much consideration we offer when we blast or when we renovate with respect to things potentially ricocheting or you know, harmful issues arising. Look, I understand it's a firearm. I understand that these things can be dangerous when in the wrong hands, and I understand that you know, our bylaws are written in such a way to protect residents. But I'm not arguing that we should repeal our bylaw. Rather, I'm just simply saying that exceptions should be offered or granted based on a application, based on us considering the exemption, and based on a discussion before council. And that's simply what I'm saying. I'm not saying that we're just going to open up Pandora's box, give everyone and anyone an exception, and let them go shooting it up like it's the wild, wild west. It's more so if in the event that there's a compelling argument as to why it's needed, exceptions should be there. And that's it.
All right. I'm not seeing any more hands, so I'm going to call the vote. So I've moved by Councillor Graziano, and I'm going to remove Councillor Bocek, and I'm going to say seconded by Councillor Cooper. Whereas Bylaw 1991-105 regulates the discharge of firearms within the Township of Georgian Bay, and whereas Bylaw 1991-105 does not provide exemptions for responsible firearm owners, hunters, or those with specific permits from higher government authorities. Now therefore be it resolved that Committee of the Whole analyze and discuss the possibility of amending Bylaw 1991-105 to include provisions for exemptions based on individual applications, allowing those seeking an exemption to request a final decision from Council, and that the process for granting exemptions align with provincial and federal firearm regulations. All those in favor? I see one. All those against? I see 1, 2, 3, makes 4. That is defeated. And thank you. And our final motion is moved by Councillor Hazelton, seconded by Councillor Jarvis. Be it resolved, the Committee of the Whole does now adjourn at 2:08 p.m. to reconvene on December 10, 2024, or at the call of the chair. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. We are adjourned.